make sure that, yeah, if you're talking, make sure you use these microphones. We tested it out. It is working, which is good.
Fred, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Well, then I guess we might as well go ahead and do this.
Okay.
Just a second here. Let me find, oh. You have to bear with me a second. I'm still trying to find where I go from meeting. Never mind.
You don't need it. just-
1A is opening statement.
There we go.
Craig has it up too if you want to.
Oh, good. Okay, so what time is it? Is everybody here?
Yes.
I think we're ready.
Okay, then I call this meeting to order. Today is January 27th, 2021 at 5:35 p.m. We are in the Brecksville Broadview Heights Education Center, 6638 Mill Road, Brecksville, Ohio. This is the meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public meeting, community meeting. There is time for public participation during the meeting as indicated as an indicated agenda item. Prior to the regular meeting, the board will meet in executive session for the consideration of the appointment, employment, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official per board policy 0166-executive session item A. This meeting will be live streamed via YouTube and will also be recorded for later viewing. Consider subscribing to our BBH Board of Education YouTube channel where all recordings are posted. Maximum capacity for this meeting is 16 people due to social distancing regulations. Available space is first come, first serve. First, we'll have a pledge of allegiance. Everybody pledge allegiance to the flag. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes. Okay, we're going to enter into an executive session. Motion to enter into executive session per Ohio Revised Code 121.22 item G for the purpose of consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, or the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, official licensee, or regulated individual unless the public employee, official licensee, or regulated individual requests a public hearing. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call?
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman, Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Go. 5:37.
We're in executive session. Would Craig and Joelle please leave the room so we can discuss?
Sure. Hold on one second. Let me
You want to stop sharing
stop the live
first.
stream.
Okay, let me know when you're ready, Craig.
We're ready.
Okay. We need to exit executive session. They need to move. Motion to exit.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes. Okay. We are now in work session. The item of our work session is full day kindergarten discussion.
You want to start, Mr. Peterson, or you want me to start, or?
Why don't you start? Go ahead, Joelle.
So we wanted to talk about full day kindergarten and how we want to proceed and hopefully make some decisions on what we want to do with kindergarten moving forward. As you know, This year, because of the pandemic and because of the way we came back in a hybrid model, we didn't really offer full-time kindergarten. We offer the way we had it set up into the hybrid model. Because we did it that way, we did not necessarily charge tuition for our kids. Our program as it sits right now is a half-day program with the option of being a full-day program at a with tuition for the second part of the day. We've been running this program. How we have kids register for this program is that we set the kindergarten registration date usually at the beginning of March. What ends up happening, because we have limited spaces in the full-day program, we timestamp everything and we end up having a lot of kids on a waiting list who subsequently either go to other districts or other schools for kindergarten year because they really want that to our full-day program. And then we end up with a couple of half-day sections, one at each building. That did not happen this year, but that's kind of the process of how kids register for kindergarten. And so this came up because of this year and kindergarten registration coming up again here for us very soon, the first week in March, to talk about what does kindergarten look like in this district moving forward. And there was a desire of at least some board members for the last couple of years to have this conversation about moving to full-day kindergarten. And most recently, the thought was that that would happen somewhere in line with the opening of our new elementary school, which, as you remember, the project was delayed a year, but that would have happened this fall if we were on that original. The question is coming up now as we're right on the cusp of kindergarten registration for this year. Because we did not collect any income from kindergarten tuition for the school year, what impact did that have on the budget? And is it something that this board, A, still wants to consider offering a full-day kindergarten program for all of our students? Or B, does that start then next year as opposed to waiting until the elementary school? Or is this something that the board doesn't even want to consider at all at this time? And so that's why we're having this work session to kind of talk through some of those scenarios, hear your ideas. Craig can go through the financial impact. He's got put some financials for it for you to consider and review as we're having this discussion and making these decisions.
Let me jump in and ask just to get some clarity, because you posted some numbers. So for this year, were we at about, it looks like 84% of our kindergartners were in the all-day program and 16% were in half-day?
Yeah, well, because we opened in hybrid, that wasn't necessarily the model, but how they registered, yes.
Okay, right. So, right, I know that,
Right.
the reality is different because of COVID.
Sure.
But at least going into it, we were at 84% and 16%. And so of that 84%, the vast majority of our families, I assume, are paying our all-day tuition, and then a percentage of those are earning scholarships. So from my recollection, when we were offering all-day kindergarten as a tuition-based offering, there was a concern about certain students academically who really would benefit from all-day kindergarten but might be economically disadvantaged. A crafting scholarship program so that those students most in need could take advantage of all-day kindergarten. And so of the 84%, do we know like what percentage are on scholarship and what percentage are on, where parents are just paying the tuition?
So because of this year, that didn't happen because of we weren't able to
Right.
offer. So
Theoretically, what would it have been?
Right. So in theory, we didn't do that this year. In years past, it's been an average of about 10 kids that would be offered that scholarship based on, a couple of criteria. There's criteria for that scholarship, not only free and reduced lunch, but it could be that somebody chose to go into the half-day program just because that's what they wanted, but after testing, realized that their test scores might indicate that they would benefit for our full-day program. So we would offer that as well. I think it was to explain it very well the last time we talked about it, about how it was the wish of the board not only to have that scholarship opportunity offered to kids of free and reduced, but also kids who maybe could afford it but wanted half day, but for whatever reason, because of their test score, offer that opportunity for them to engage more in kindergarten instruction, even though they could pay for it.
And as our, you mentioned that sometimes families would get, they would get locked out of all-day kindergarten because there were so many who wanted to get into it. And have we opened up new classes as we start seeing numbers go up? And if we haven't, why? And why couldn't we? Like, why couldn't we? Because I know we had some of this, the last time we had this discussion, it was, we were at a critical point in the design of the new building. And we were trying to figure out, do we design enough classroom space for full-day kindergarten? And that was where we were talking about, do we offer full-day kindergarten? Not offer, but I guess just to clarify too, for people paying attention, we offer all-day kindergarten, but it is not mandated by the state. The state recommends that you offer all-day kindergarten because it is educationally beneficial for students, but they did not go so far as to mandate it, because if they would have mandated it and not funded it, it would have been a huge unfunded state mandate. So if you hear about unfunded state mandates, that the state said, all-day kindergarten is great, everybody's got to do it, but we're not going to give you any money, that would be a huge unfunded mandate. Instead, the state said, all-day kindergarten is great, you can offer it, and if you offer it, you can charge tuition to cover the extra cost. We're obligated, mandated by the state to provide a half-day program. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay. So when we were talking about the school, the new building, we were trying to figure out how much classroom space do we add, and that's when the last time we had this conversation, which was a couple of years ago. And I went back and rewatched some of it because it was the last time we did this. And where we left off was, from the design of the building, we said, let's just design it to accommodate all-day kindergarten, since most of our families are in it anyway. And so I guess maybe let me start there. Is our new building set up to accommodate space-wise to handle all day if we were to do all day?
Yes.
Okay. So our new building, more parents say, we want to go into all day and we can pay for it, or there's scholarship available to just opening up new classes for all day. Can we continue down that trend? Because I can see these numbers, more and more of our families have been going in to all day. It looks like in 18-19, we're at 59%. In 19-20, we're at 64%. Oh, I'm sorry, we were at 75%, then 79%, then 84% this year, which I know it's COVID. But so there's been an upward trajectory of more opening up more classes to accommodate the numbers.
We have, we obviously, when we closed Central School, there's a little bit of a spacing issue, and we've talked about ways to get more space if that trend continues to grow until we get into the new building, of being able to do that. There also, if more parents wanted to get into full day, there's also a possibility, because right now we run one half-day section at each of the elementary schools, PM only. So there is a way to create an AM and PM to open up a space to create another full-time. That definitely has impact on busing, because if we're saying we only have space at one building and we want to offer another full day section of kindergarten, we can do that. But if we're taking kids, let's say the space that we have available is at Highland, we then, if it's kids that live in the Chippewa attendance boundaries or the kids that live in the Hilton attendance boundaries, we then would be required to provide transportation. So yes, we can do that. Unfortunately, because of spacing issues right now, we have limited space. We could do it at a particular building, back up an AM and a PM section of half day to accommodate those kids if we had to, but then we would incur the busing costs of where those kids live to get them to that one location.
What's the alternative in opening up just full day sections at all three buildings and allowing the half day students to attend as a regular peer in a classroom? And if they have a class of 16 that are all day and they happen to be a half day, they just go home at lunch.
Mm-hmm.
So they become one of 17 then. Is there an option to open?
I don't know what happened.
Sorry. Is there an option to open more full day sections and accommodate the half day students as peers in those full day sections rather than allocating specified time for them?
To some degree, because, if you are already having sections of full day kindergarten that are at 23 and you take, 17 half day kids and push them into each of those sections, now you've got a class of, possibly 28 for a while, if that's what you're talking about. Do you know what I'm saying? So like,
Okay.
you can't just take the half day kids and put them into a full day section. Now, we could limit the number of half day sections that we offer and say, if you want half day, it'll be at this school at, either a morning or an afternoon session, which then frees up some space, 2 classrooms and others to open another section of full day. So yes, there are some things that we can do.
But we would still be responsible for the busing in those instances as well.
Busing in those instances,
Okay.
and it's an increase in staff, as we would have to take we currently have 3 half-day teachers, so you could have you'd have to increase one of them to full-time to run 2 half-day sections, and then increase the other ones to accommodate having another full-time section. So we can do whatever. There's just some cost implications depending on what you want that to look like.
I think we have 2 this year. Last year there was 3.
Mhm.
So this year there's 2.
Oh, because
there's 2
of the online, yes, you're right.
I just have like some logistical questions. So the way our new building's set up, there'll be like a kindergarten village, like a little area where all the kindergartners are. Is that correct?
Right. We have a K1, what we're calling, like a
Okay.
K1 building. And so all the kindergarten rooms will be together.
Because you and I had talked before, like educationally, that would be like the ideal that we would
Sure.
have something like that. What is the maximum? We had 11 you said 11 kindergarten classes a full day. Is that correct?
Well, we just
Like
have
we don't
11.
know what the number is, but given the current numbers now, how many kindergarten is that full day again? Can you explain? How many did you say that was full day we have now?
Full day, it's 8 of all the kindergarten kids. We have, 84% are all day kindergarten. So there are.
Because what I'm trying to ask you, what I'm going to get at is what is our target class size? Remember us talking about that in kindergarten and that idea of, can we do what we really need to do, which is, a great hearty full day kindergarten that has the correct class size, that we're not going over, what would be the target for that?
Well, so the classrooms themselves, and so I'm going to give you 2 numbers. The classrooms themselves are designed in space to house 25 kids per classroom.
Okay.
However, I know here we don't have a standard of putting 25 kids in the classroom, so we're ideally looking at 22 and 23.
Still high. Because I remember with Dr. Kalavec, I remember she would go through and say, well, here's our target, what we're trying to hit. We always kind of kept that in mind when we were looking at that. The reason why I'm asking is, does that half day offer us an opportunity to hit more of that target? It doesn't look to me, those numbers aren't significant that are in a half day program. So if I go and create these full days, I'm still going to be able to have small class sizes. They're still not as low as I would hope that they were in a kindergarten, but we still could really pull out a great full day program with putting those kids as full day if we had completely full day. Okay, so those half days don't reduce anything. They don't reduce the size necessarily. We would have to, is that right? That's half and half. So it'd be 1 full. I'm just trying to think about what that does for us. Like, what is the positive of having half day educationally? And I can't seem to wrap my head around why it's positive.
Well, so by state law, we have to offer it to parents that want it. So,
I get that. Yeah.
So I don't know if anyone's going to sit here and say that there's, what is the advantage of having a half
Right.
day? We're required to do it. But if it is the wish of the board to have just a full day program, we could then do kind of what Brittany said and take some of these half day kids and either create a morning or an afternoon, or they just become part of that number. It's going to make those, full day number classes larger, but then it would be larger for half a day. And then some of those kids would then come out.
So you're saying that they would join for half a day. Okay, so I've taught that model. It's not an easy model, and it's not a good one from a classroom management. It's very difficult to do that because you're talking about what's going to go on in the afternoon and they're going to be missing. So although that sounds good in theory, it's really, and I'm looking only at education right now. So I'm asking you, like, in your mind, what educational benefit, other than offering a choice for parents, tell me what the educational benefit is of a half-day program. Why to hold on to that educationally? Do you see any reason why? Is it better for early entrance? Is it
well,
better for, is there any educational reason why to hold on to that half day?
Well, I mean, my personal opinion
That's
is
what I
no. These kids should be engaged in kindergarten and a full day program. You know, it's been happening for years, and they've done it. They did it. The original thought is that a lot of the urban schools got grant money years ago when they opened full day kindergarten, so they were able to establish that program because, you know, more is more here. So when you're talking early intervention or kids that are struggling, the more that they can be in front of a teacher and have more opportunities to intervene and be in the classroom, you know, the stronger possibility you have of these kids being successful in school. And so, you know, there are for many reasons, religious reasons, there are personal reasons that the parents want their kids in school for only a half day. So,
I get that.
right. But from an educational standpoint, with all of the standards that we have now and what kids need and to be able to do, the more time we can have with kids, the better off the kids are going to be educationally, in my personal opinion.
Well, plus like the opportunity for services and early intervention, speech pathology, physical therapy that they can get, a lot of that interrupts a kid's day to where they only have a potential of really 40 minutes of instruction. So now you're elongating that day. You got a lot of social interaction. So there's a lot of educational potential in your mind for a full day, all the way out program educationally.
Yeah.
A lot of potential.
Well, and I don't think that's never been in debate. I mean, we talked
Well,
about
I
this 2 years
understand, but for
ago.
the public, it's important.
No, I
to go
understand,
through
but that's why the states really encourages you do an all-day program. They just won't give you money to pay for it. So that, you know, the biggest problem that's facing the board now about all-day kindergarten isn't really whether or not there's educational benefit. It's more the cost. I mean, at the end of the day, when we talked about this a couple of years ago, the cost was $418,000 of additional cost. And I know, and we're gonna, we'll get into some of these numbers now about what is that number, but you know, ultimately that becomes the biggest barrier because you're talking about voluntarily taking on a huge financial burden. Our taxpayers would take on a huge financial burden to say we're going to go from a tuition-based all-day kindergarten model to in essence, free all-day kindergarten model where we, the district, i.e. the tax, that ultimately is going to be the biggest topic that we have to discuss. You know, what is that cost? And, you know, are we as a board ready to sign up our taxpayers and put a big hole in our budget, which means a new levy coming sooner rather than later and bigger rather than smaller, because you're adding whatever that number is, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 more, you know, as well as all of our family program. If they can cohere for free, you have to think there's going to be some uptick in the number of families who may want to come into our district and take advantage of free all-day kindergarten, which means the cost might even be more. Whatever that cost is, it might even be higher. And whatever that cost is, you know, most of the cost of a school district is salary and benefits, and those go up, you know, at a pretty good clip, you know, which means whatever that cost is today, it's going to keep going up at that same higher clip going forward. So all of that is the burden that would be put on the taxpayers should the board say, we want to shift from an all-day kindergarten tuition-based model where 85% of our families are mostly, you know, paying for it, to shifting all of that burden onto the taxpayers.
You know, and I want to make sure we say free because it's not free. The taxpayers were allocating that money that they have entrusted to us towards the kindergarten. I also want to say that before COVID hit, I now know a lot of our families are hurting financially. I don't know that they can fund something the way that they funded it in the past. And because we are a business of education, because that's where I would imagine the taxpayers expected their money would go. It seems to me that it would be what they wanted. And it creates this fairness that in my mind, I always struggled with, tried to, and I talked to Joelle when we were a couple of years ago, when we created that sliding scale, trying to create that equitability, and it still feels, why am I charging for that just because I can? And I'm not sure I can anymore. This last year, just knowing what I know about a lot of people here, I don't know that they can afford it the way they did in the past. And that's my thought.
Do we have, or yeah, I'm sure we do, but I'd like to get an idea of how much we're spending for the scholarships, for lack of a better, but the kindergarten students who go into the all-day program and we're, helping to cover the cost of that. What's the annual cost of that the last few years?
Well, so we didn't have it this year, obviously.
Right.
So last year, I think the way we have it set up. So 10 kids, and some of those are reduced. So it would be half the tuition of $1,300, and some of them are free, just depending on, some other factors. So I don't know if we ran those numbers to know how many, but you're talking 10 students times $2,600. It's not a large
$20,000,
sum of money
Yeah.
that we're, paying to put those
So
scholars.
maybe less than $30,000.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Yeah.
There's two other, I guess, things that you should be aware of as a board, because of the way we do kindergarten right now in the registration, and there's this timestamp that we have to do. I mean, prior to us going to online registration, this is a stressful time for parents, because they're trying to get first in line so that they can get, guaranteed one of those full-time slots, and, putting down their money and all of that. And it caused, we have families that are trying to sneak in ahead of time and put their forms in because they're so nervous and, worried that their child is not going to get one of these full-time spots, because of the scholarship, we only register up to a certain number. So if we're saying that our target is, 20 or 23 in a class for full-time kindergarten, we might only register 20 kids so that we save slots for those scholarship kids that we figure out after the fact. And the reason we figure out after the fact is because we have to wait for free and reduced lunch applications to come in, which aren't even available for the upcoming school year until after July, because they're processed every year because the poverty rate changes. Of kids who come and register like 2 days before the start of kindergarten. So we have those. So then we have to wait to test. So we're testing these kids for these specific scholarships. And then it's left up to us to make the choice, okay, who gets this scholarship? It's really, really not a good process. And it's really, really not a good process that we put our parents through to be so nervous and worry about full-time slots in kindergarten. And so, you just need to know that this is the other side of it that you don't see necessarily out there, but it's everyone's reality of what we're doing. And then because we can only register because we have to save these slots for the kids who might get scholarships. In the meantime, those families that are put on waiting lists because they really want full day, that's when they go and they look elsewhere. And then some who come late and they don't have that option, we just have to so our half day numbers, they might be even lower, but they get higher as the school year approaches or right before the school year approaches. We, at one point over the summer, I think it was in July, at Chippewa, they only had 8 kids registered for half day, but they had, and I think it is still 8 kids that they had at half day. And so we were thinking, okay, did we collapse that section, try to open up another full? So we have all of these conversations behind the scenes to try to figure out how to maximize as many kids as we can, and wants for parents that when they come to us and say, this is what we really want, and try to get them before they leave. And we're on the phone calling saying, hey, this person now has withdrawn. Do you want this slot? There's looked at only having a full day program. None of this would be an issue for our parents. There wouldn't be a need to register at 8 a.m. on March 2nd because there's no need to timestamp if all we're offering is a full day program.
But doesn't a lot of this constraint messiness go away in fall 22? we're going to be in our new building and we have space for all day for everything. So right now we're divided out amongst 3 buildings, right? 8 people registered at Chippewa, right? It's like, well, when we get to the new building, first of all, we should have enough building space so that if 95% of our, families want to go into all-day kindergarten, we should be able to offer it. Wouldn't we be able to move past this constraint-based, I'm going to be online at 8 o'clock and try to get in queue and get in my line? Because once we get to the new building, we could accommodate however many people want all-day kindergarten, we should be able to accommodate. And whatever's left over in the half-day, we can feather that in one building.
Well, sure. But then it goes back to, it could, depending on what those half-day numbers look like, instead of having, because if you, to your point, if you have 95%, that means you might need all 11 sections of that kindergarten, and then you take those half-day kids that want half-day, and you have to stick them into those full-day classes, and then they're going to have to leave, which, as Kathleen said, could be disruptive, as opposed to just having a half-day section of kids, possibly. We just don't know.
But we can never, it's a state mandate that if somebody only wants half-day, we have to provide it, right?
Right.
So if we open the new building and 90 just pay for it, or we can offer a scholarship to get them in. And what we're left with is, 12 kids. And it's like, well, we're not going to do a class with just 12 kids. We're going to feather those into the pre-existing classes. And although that may not be an ideal model, if that's the number, if it's an odd number, you've got to be able to deal with it. Those parents, you could go back to them and say, look, all days here, it could be an option, but if they want half day, we have to accommodate. So, but don't we have to deal with that every year with
We have
numbers?
to accommodate half day?
Yes, if somebody wants half day, you can't.
So you would
put them
have a
in
class
full
of
day.
1?
No, they would be.
They would be feathered in.
I didn't know that. I've not seen that happening.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, and I
yeah.
thought practically speaking, I know a bunch of districts do the opposite, not the opposite, but they offer all day kindergarten. I think practically speaking, then very few people choose the half day option.
Correct.
Okay. So
So Mr. Murdock, can I loop you in and ask you some questions here? Very knowledgeable. So let's start with this. So are we able to use, and I don't know if you know this, or it's fine. Are we able to use Title I funds to subsidize, to pay for salaries? Yes.
Yes.
It goes for our.
I get it, but some options, because we could, if we saw that we had this influx, and again, we haven't spent a lot of time talking about numbers in our younger grades, but some districts put those children in full day programs, EDK or something like that, but they go and they pay for the salary of that teacher. I was paid for that way. So that is an option. We choose to take, and I don't know what our number is for title. Maybe it's not as expansive of where I was at in Elyria, but that could take that number down if you thought the data provided the fact that if we front loaded and gave all these people the same opportunity and chose to pay for this full day, take the taxpayers' money and pay for it that way, we could find other ways creatively to take that 400, I don't know what it was, that number down if we wanted to reallocate funds, for example, with Title I.
We don't get as much as large urban districts.
Right.
It's very small compared. And we are already using that for salary and benefits for,
Spreading it out like in,
well, no.
Title I services.
And what's left over after that is not much for supplies and so forth. So I don't know.
Well, and the only problem with that is that with cost of kindergarten, the general fund's gonna hit the other way somewhere else, so.
it's about 300, is it 300,000 Title I funds coming in?
It's
400?
270,000
Okay.
maybe, and then part of that goes to the non-public, so it's less than that.
Okay, so it's like 150 maybe.
No, it's like 240.
Okay, just because I don't know when the last time was we looked at that, but just looking at this third grade guarantee that we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about a lot of, there was years, and I remember Dr. Kalovic explaining to us, and you guys weren't on the board, we had a whole group of students coming through that came in ridiculously low when they started on their, I don't know if it was doubles or I can't, was that what we, so they came in so low and it was already November, if you remember the scenario, and they were backsliding still. And so when we see that, is that a trend that we've been seeing? I don't know. We haven't talked about what it's looking like, what our kids are coming in. But for us to think about that, wouldn't it in the end benefit us all the way through that system, third grade, fourth grade, some of the other ways we're using that money, would that, maybe we wouldn't use title the way we did. I don't know. You could front load it. So there's ways of relooking at how we've been doing things. We're gonna have an opportunity. We're gonna be in the same building. Maybe things look a little differently. Maybe that number comes down. And maybe this board decides, if it's data driven, that you're saying, listen, if we do this in kindergarten, this will hopefully prevent what we're seeing when, I don't know. You know, I haven't heard, are we trending? Have things gotten better? Or do you think that that's a good allocation of funds? Just, I don't know.
I don't reserve any kind of general comment on the pandemic because things are not
I
as
know,
consistent as they used to be.
I get
I
it.
will say that, yes, early intervention is the best bang for your buck. You have to make sure it's specialized. So you're absolutely right. Putting out a kindergarten teacher in there without the training to whatever, lessen the class size. I'm not certain that's going to be.
Right.
However, I do agree, early intervention, that goes K1, years. That would be very much supported. Well, yeah.
Well, and
Absolutely thinking about how we do it.
so one other thing I just thought of though too is we'll have to see how this affects the new building because as we were just kind of side talking a little bit too, is we're targeted assistance here. So we can only use title funds right now this year. Well, Hilton goes in and out and we can use it at Highland and the middle school.
Right.
But last year was just Highland and the middle school. So I don't know how that's going to really pan out. Like once we go to the new building, will we even qualify? So we may not even qualify at all. which
Well,
would be
and
not
and
good.
keep in mind, if everybody agrees all-day kindergarten has tremendous educational value. So the idea is, how do you get more students in all-day kindergarten, ideally, because educationally it's better. Well, 2 years ago, 75% of our students were in all-day kindergarten. Last year, it was 79%. With building constraints. So the trajectory is up. And when we get to the new building in fall 2022, we won't have any constraints. So there's every reason to believe we could be at, at least at 84% is probably the floor. We'd probably be 90% maybe.
Well, I'm not arguing that. I'm more looking at, we were given this money by the taxpayers. What would they want? They trust us to look educationally best bang for their buck. And that's the way I'm looking at it. And when I'm talking to Mr. Martin and I talk to Mrs. Magyar, bang for your buck is for us to pay for all day kindergarten. And they would want us to allocate the money that way because we know educationally that's really where it needs to start.
But 84% of our students right now would have been in all-day kindergarten without us paying for them.
I understand.
You're talking about
but
a
they
big
shouldn't have
shift.
to pay. They shouldn't have to pay.
Okay, I get it, and this is a good, honest conversation. But you know what? Our parents should also not have to pay for student fees, pay to participate. I mean, you can go down the list. The reality is, in Ohio, there has been a shift over the last 20 plus years of more costs from the district onto families. It's an unfortunate thing. When I was in school, nobody paid to play or be participated. It was all funded. So how did we end up with pay to play in a lot of places? It's because budgets get tighter and districts have to figure out what can we do. So all of a sudden you get the third grade fee schedule and, the pay to participate and pay to park at the high school and all of these things. That's not ideal. I mean, ideally, the district could pay for everything, but at the end of the day, you have financial constraints. And so, what we have to be mindful of is that if we take, so for everybody that's paying attention, in our district, 1 mil, when you go out for a levy, like our last levy was 5.99 mils, okay? 1 mil generates about $1 million of revenue for the school district. So our last levy was about $6 million. Frozen, that $6 million is the same every year. When property values go up, the 6 mil doesn't generate more than $6 million. That total amount is frozen. Okay, that's just the way the state system is set up, which is why so many times districts have to go back on the ballot because their costs keep going up, but the millage and the levies don't generate more revenue. So you start to have this imbalance. Well, if we're talking about the cost of all-day kindergarten, which right now most of our parents, fortunately, are able to afford the tuition-based program, you're talking about taking on that cost to the taxpayers. So if it's, let's just say $500,000, that's like a $500,000. That's significant. So, as we talk about this, if we decide, oh, well, the board just wants to take it all on and fund all-day kindergarten, we're basically shifting $500,000 a year. And I'm just using that number because we haven't gotten into the financial. The taxpayers, and that number is going to go up over time because salaries and benefits will go up. So we have to be very careful about signing up the taxpayers for a massive increase in costs that they don't have a voice in.
Well, I mean, I think there's a difference between fees and thousands of dollars of money for families who are just starting out. Okay, these are our newest families to this district. And if given the choice, they will do everything for their kids. I was one of them. But I find it unfair for us when I look at other districts around me, ones that I'm employed with, that those children, those parents don't have to pay. So I get what you're saying, but because that's our business. Sports is not our business. I know that's not popular. So the pay to participate, I don't find as unfair as when I look at the kindergarten, because that's our business. That's what we should be doing. And no, I don't take it lightly. And I recognize the hardship we had with the mills and with our levies, but this is the way it should be.
Well,
Educationally, this is the way. This is our business.
Okay, keep in mind, 84% of our students would have been in all-day kindergarten. So the benefit of all-day kindergarten is still there, and it's been trending up, and there's every reason to believe it'll continue to trend up. Okay, this really becomes a financial question. Okay, because we have in place a system where parents who can afford it, and thank goodness there's a lot that can afford it, are choosing all-day kindergarten. And those who can't, we have options to get them into all-day kindergarten. So listen, we're going to need to get into the financials of this because we still don't know. 2 years ago, it was $418,000. The numbers that Craig put together, there's some contradictions in a couple of numbers. And, maybe we can also hone in on this because the difference between 400, these are big numbers, and we need to wrap our hands around what are these numbers and what's in them and what do we project, because like I said, you start making it a free all-day kindergarten for everybody, you may be having a lot more parents shift their kids from other all-day programs into ours, and your cost might even go higher.
I think, Mrs. Mack, based on your comments about the investment up front, having recently gone through it, I can agree that there is a cost to it. And, the district is gracious enough to allow parents to either pay that in one lump sum up front or on a monthly basis. I will say, having also come off daycare payments, it's significantly less of an investment than the all-day kindergarten fees that are tied to it. And these are the parents whose children were likely in daycare and they were paying the fees to keep their kids.
I don't
And so
know,
that-
I mean, I don't know that they are, I don't know that that percentage is more than 25%.
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
I don't know
understand.
that those are all working parents, at least the ones when I went through, at least the ones that I know now. I don't think that people were paying for daycare. I think there's a lot of families that those people are stay at home still.
All I'm saying is that the departure from daycare payments to kindergarten payments isn't a stretch for those who are paying for daycare. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I get it.
And I tend to agree with Mark that while, yes, I know our peer districts are footing the bill for all-day kindergarten, and yes, we agree that all-day kindergarten is where all of our kids, we would like to see them all. I think biting that off. And I don't know that that's an entirely fair position to put on both of our communities for 300 families.
The other idea I just want to throw out, because I do want to let Craig speak to some of these numbers so we can try to figure out where we're going to land. But another idea to consider is when you're talking about such a significant cost, additional cost to the taxpayer, of taking this issue and bundling it into the next operating levy, whenever that is. I mean, when we get the numbers squared away, right? Let's say it's a $500,000 that, we're going on the ballot for however many mills, and 1/2 of that is dedicated to provide all-day kindergarten, fully funded all-day kindergarten. And then that way, we're not trying to find the board to decide, should we spend $500,000 every year of taxpayer money? We put it back on the community, say, is this a priority for you? We educate them and say, here's the way it's set up now. Here's what you'd be getting for your money. And then we'd have a clear direction from our community on whether or not they think they should, they want to fund it. So it's just something to think about. And based on our financials, how much longer before we're on the ballot? Hard to say, but current financials are, it's not going to be, we wouldn't need to wait that long. So something to think about.
So I would be happy to talk about the numbers. And so some of this is just obviously because, I'm coming up on a year here. And so I kind of broke this down into two different ways to look at it. So I pulled what's in the accounting system, and I'm not necessarily surprised, but that's okay. So I tracked we do track the revenues in terms of what's coming in, and what in doing this exercise, obviously, there's been a lot of things that I've found out this year, and this is definitely an area that I think that moving forward, if we continue to charge tuition, we're going to have to keep a really close eye on. So when we look at the numbers, we've got to make sure that the revenues coming in should be somewhat closer. They exactly are. And then the expenditures, for instance, in fiscal 19, the salaries alone, and I know these are different years of comparing, but that's because of what I was able to try to get before the pandemic. Like, I know that the teacher salaries were more when I ran those in 19 than the $744,000. So I really don't know exactly what happened. That was way before my time. So there's some discrepancies in the accounting piece. The part I'm confident on is the numbers in terms of staffing in fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21. Because of the online model, I think that's why we went up a half an FTE basically. But those are the actual salaries from last year and for this year. And I broke down the biggest pieces, which are salaries, pension, and healthcare. And so just moving from one year to the next, to Mark's point, when you don't know what this is going to look like in terms of what the cost are of your teachers, it's going to increase. But from 1 year, and the teaching staff is basically the same. I think there was one person who changed out and we added a half. That is a brand new teacher, but it is still increased by $41,000. And that is just in changes, basically in steps, which then ripples through in terms of retirement. And some people may have gone from single to family. I think there was a couple of those that impact that number. So just the salaries of that program are costing the district $1 million. And so then the question is really, I mean, the bottom the numbers of what that is. So but Joelle's already included those numbers in there. So that's the minimum cost you're looking at in terms of salaries and benefits, but there's even more to that than that. So the question is, how are we tracking revenues? If those revenue numbers are accurate at 450, 420, we obviously know fiscal 20 was down because we refunded some of that out at the end of last year. There's subsidized $600,000. So it's logical to say that that number to subsidize, if that again is fully accurate from the accounting system side, we're going to have to subsidize an additional $500,000 for that program to be all day. And then of course, next year, it could also go up $40,000. So it's going to continue to possibly ripple. Now, most of those teachers they've now, I want to say 6 of those teachers have maxed out. So they're stepped out. So their salaries don't increase at that point, but the other ones then increase, and then their benefits could change as well. So that's kind of where we are. And one of the things we haven't talked about in terms of maybe there is middle ground of this is, and Joelle probably has more of an idea of how to explain this, I guess, but just lunch to just offer the tuition based, and then like to Kathleen's point of some of the families who made their financial situation may have changed, we could offer the financial assistance based on actual data that they qualify, right? So maybe we have a sliding scale that could be somewhere to meet in between. But if we're talking, and I understand, I'm 100% here for same reasons of education and what we should be doing, and I agree 100% that educationally the full day program is most sound. Where we are in deficit spending and consistent deficit spending, I'm just not sure that it's the right time to take on that large of a chunk. And maybe somewhere in the middle ground would be somewhere to at least start.
This conversation started almost 10 years ago. I mean, I think that's the age of me on this board now. And, it was always, we're going to do that. We're going to do that. I like your idea of at least trying to start, because the scale was moving in the right direction, but I think things have really changed in this community in this last year. And I just, the fact that maybe they don't qualify for free and reduced, but they have, financial hardship to not be able to do that. It's not right based on what I believe the values of this community are. So, I even challenge this board to at least consider something and a recognition that we need to try a little bit more to make sure that all those kids have that opportunity. And they may not qualify for free and reduced.
Which everybody's bringing up some excellent points. Can you be more specific about or maybe you didn't have anything in mind, but you said a middle ground.
Well, Joelle and I have had that conversation because, we have real conversations about what this does to the budget. And so I think that's what Hudson does, right? Mm-hmm. So they do a sliding scale, but like someone who's on reduced, maybe they pay $1,000 for tuition, right? But if they qualify legitimately through free, then it's free all day tuition.
It's much like, I'm thinking
or,
just what you were saying, like our athletics, how we tried to take that burden off. We went and the board was 100%, and then we switched. This would be the same concept where maybe we're not going to figure this out today, but what would it be that we could subsidize a little bit more to get what we really are hoping for, which is the best educational opportunities for all kids?
I'm not following you. Our trend line has been 75% participation, 79% participation, 84% participation. Going into this year, we were at 84% of our families in all-day kindergarten reaping the benefits. Although again, I know this year we're not at all-day kindergarten.
Yes.
But my point is the trend line has been up with space constraints. In 1 year, there's every reason to believe we're not going to backslide, but we may even have more participating. So the whole point Is the whole point to get more students in all-day kindergarten or to reduce the cost of those who are in it today?
To get more, it's not more students, it's to reduce the cost, but I believe that more will come as well. And I'm not going to I'm looking at March as my start point. I'm not looking at this year. I'm looking at March and looking at I think next year we're going to be in for a whole new thing. And I don't want people to have to make that choice. Mark, that's all I'm asking is for us to maybe consider the fact that that trend line is going to go down and we're doing it because they can't afford it.
Well, here, the other side of what you're talking about is you're talking about a lot of our families are going to be struggling economically
Right.
and may not be able to afford all-day kindergarten. Well, extrapolate that. A lot of our families in our community are going to be struggling economically from COVID, and you're going to be talking about going back on the ballot sooner with a larger number. So you're going back to the same population that's struggling and saying, hey, the ones that are struggling to fund all-day kindergarten, now we want the rest of the community, which could also be struggling from the COVID-19 recession, to say, now you need to pay more in taxes. So everybody is going to be sharing in this burden. And, you know, to sign up for it and say, well, let's just reduce the cost. I guess I'm not understanding what the benefit to us is. We already have a trend line that's going in the right direction. We already have 84% of our families that are taking advantage of a better educational model. And we have every reason to believe that when we get to the new building, that it could be even better. Why not wait till we get to the new building and see where we're at? We can continue to monitor this and review it. And as we get closer to that next operating levy somewhere down the road, the board can then start looking at feathering this cost into that bond, that levy issue down the road to say, hey, part of this levy is going to be also to fund all-day kindergarten, and then let the community decide.
Ellen, what are your thoughts? I happen to, you raised some excellent points. I actually happen to agree with where Mark is going with us. I just think I'm sad about it, but I don't think adding it now makes sense.
I think that's where I'm at too. It puts an extra burden on roughly 300 families, but to go to free, so to speak, all-day kindergarten when we're getting, funding from 84, and I think Mark is going to be right in it's going to do nothing but go up when we have the room to put them all. So it doesn't make any sense to me right now to do it.
Okay. All right.
So back to what Craig started talking about is looking at, can we repackage it? And what we mean by that, instead of saying we offer this half-day program and we're going to date and timestamp everyone to rush to get these spots that we have in these full-day programs, can we repackage it and say we are going to offer a tuition-based full-day program? If you want half-day, you can sign up for half-day, and it might be at X location or at this building. And if based on numbers, if we could figure that out, decide where that's going to be. And then look at free and reduced numbers to then offer those scholarships for those kids that qualify for free and reduced lunch. This does a couple of things. It eliminates the craziness of our families scrambling to register at 8 o'clock in the morning on March 2nd. They can register whenever they want because they're not competing for a slot. It is. It's also.
So you want to bus kids, like not to their community schools? Is that like for the half day? Like, is that what you're saying? You'd offer it maybe just at one building, centrally located, and everybody would go there. So it might not be their community school.
Possibly, but it's going to be based on numbers.
Okay.
Anything we can do to reduce the hassle they have to go through, I'm for.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it would be, something that, okay, if we can't offer this, let's make the process easier, and let's make the process easier to all of your points. Let's just say we're going to do a full day tuition, and there could be people that say, you know what, we can't sign up for that because we can't afford it. We can still allow them to sign up and say, you know what, we're going to, in July, when the free and reduced lunch applications are available, we will send them to everybody, fill them out, and there might be a chance for that tuition to be cut in half or free, depending on what it is. By doing this, we're taking a burden off of our parents of having this mad scramble. It achieves the same goal as the board. We're still offering scholarships to those kids who qualify for scholarship. You may, and I ran some numbers. We've had on average 23 to 24 kids in kindergarten that qualify for free and reduced lunch. This year it was really low. We had 11 kids only, but for years we've only given 10 scholarships.
Lunch and breakfast was free this year too, so
Right.
what's my incentive to?
So we had, we've only given 10 scholarships. So even if we had 24 kids come in and they were free and reduced, you're still, by not limiting those full day slots to cap it at 20 in a section, you're allowing more tuition paying students to get into those sections because it's not a competition anymore.
Yeah, I'd like to see that happen.
There'd probably be a slight increase because, as to Mark's point, if that's what we're offering and we can open up another section, one of those current half-time teachers might have to become full-time and look at a different way to provide still that half-day service. But it's something that we can look at doing just to ease doing the registration and how we program or how we market kindergarten a little bit differently, just to ease the burden on some of our families.
I need a little clarification because I'm not sure I follow along with your whole proposal. So I thought part of our constraint was we don't have enough room to offer if everybody signed up for all the kindergarten, that we have a space crunch until we get in a new building.
We
Is
do.
that- Okay. So what you're saying today though is that, the all-day kindergarten sections that we can offer, we're reserving spots later for these tuition-based students. And by doing that, it creates a bottleneck. And that's what all these parents trying to get in line at 8 o'clock in the morning. And if instead we just open all slots up, and we could accommodate everybody who wants to get into all-day kindergarten, but won't that reduce the opportunity for students who really need to be in?
So if we're just saying that everyone's signing up for full day, except for those people that are adamant, because just like if we did offer a full day program, we would still have to accommodate those half-time people. So if we said we're opening up, everything is going to be a full-time kindergarten tuition paying program. You may have parents that come and say, I can't afford the tuition. That's okay. We're still going to sign you up for the full day program because that's what we're doing. We will then look at the free and reduced lunch applications, make sure you fill them out. And if they qualify, we can call that family back and say, hey, you qualify for reduced, or guess what? You're still going to get the full day because you qualified for free lunch. And so that kid is still in the full day program. So in other words, the only half day kids we would accommodate are those parents who come in and say, I'm absolutely only want my kid in half day kindergarten, that we would offer this full day program open to all. And then on the backside, charge people accordingly to how they qualify on that free and reduced lunch application.
Well, and I think if we would offer them at one location with these numbers and their half day, it would make more sense. We would have to hire, not necessarily less teachers, but because they're spread out right now, you
Right,
have to
it's
have a
two
teacher in
spaces,
those
right.
buildings to move.
That's why it would be a slight increase in personnel, because if we take two of those halftime teachers and make them both full to accommodate yet another section of full day, we could, in theory, depending on what those half day numbers are, move them to one building and do a morning and an afternoon class. They take up, so two classes
Well, and
now
you may
take up
only need
one
one.
space. Right.
You may only need one teacher for an AM and a PM, and that's it.
So is it fair to say that what you're proposing is going to be relatively cost neutral for the board, but will resolve this mad scramble to get in line?
Well, I don't know
would
if-
think so. I mean, if you're already giving 10 scholarships, so if you went, let's say all of those qualified, we basically would be giving a max of 25 for free.
And you're in theory getting more tuition paying kids because we're not capping those classes to save room. We're just letting them all in and then backfilling the free and reduced, if that makes sense. But it's somewhat cost neutral, but we currently have the people, but some of them are working part-time. So it might be an increase of their, part-time to full-time. So I don't want to put out there that's cost neutral. There might be some cost involved in it.
But it
But it
wouldn't be
doesn't-
$400,000.
Yes, and it's
That's why I
not
said
eliminated.
relatively.
Yeah, relatively, yeah.
Define relative.
Yeah, I know.
Some of us relatively is
Well-
different
well-
than others. But
well-
are you talking 40,000, like for another half of a salary, or are we
Well,
talking
it-
100,000?
Well, it's 20, you're talking 20, we're saying about 20,000 for the scholarships. So if you double that, that's going to be an additional 20,000, and half of a teacher, another 4, so maybe 60, 70,000.
Depending if they take benefits. I mean, there's a bunch of, you
Well,
know,
the half times, they don't
Yeah,
qualify.
well,
And do we have the space, the building space to accommodate for however many classes we end up with based on enrollment?
yes.
Well, and you'd have to cut them off at some point, right?
Yeah.
If there was a mass influx.
Right. I mean, so right now, if you, those 2 halftime teachers have their own room. So if you collapse one, that's one whole room, right, that you would have. And then we have also some things that we were thinking about doing anyways, if we were back full-time in session, of looking at different ways to deliver services. And so we have some others lot. So we're still going to have to look at how much we can do. And then we may have to force then a half-day program at one particular building for if it gets to be where there's too many kids, we may have to do that. And, you know, we always have, it's not that it's ideal, but again, it's, you know, the longer we've gone and the shorter term it is, you know, we talked last year about modular units, not to put kids in, but to move services. So then you could open up another classroom. If we ran into an issue for a year, we could do this. But I think packaging this differently, looking at it differently, saying that this is what we're offering on a tuition, it makes it less stressful for our parents that, you know, absolutely are stressed out about kindergarten registration every year because of this timing thing. So if we just get rid of that and people can register when they can register and back into, you know, the still being able to offer that scholarships for those kids that qualify, we're essentially achieving the same goal, but packaging it in a way that's less stressful for our families.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm fine with it, even at a relatively cost neutral, right? A small increase. I mean, this is a bridge to get to our new building. We got one more year that we need to get through on these, with these buildings. And hopefully we'll be on the other side of COVID. You know, we've had enrollment decline with families leaving because of all the issues with COVID and in-person learning. We're not sure how that's going to play out. So this gives us a little bit of a runway to get through COVID, get through a bridge to our new building, and then we can maybe revisit and see where we're at with all of this.
And now you have the opportunity to communicate that before all the marketing starts. The full day Catholic school, so that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, try and keep those parents.
Sounds like we got a plan.
Sounds like a
Okay.
Look at that, Fred. We ended right at 7 o'clock. You are an incredible president.
yeah. Good job.
I didn't break my femur just so we could do this on time.
Yeah.
Well done.
Well done to everybody. I think it was a good, thorough, long discussion and it was necessary.
So we have item 4. Do you want to?
Now, let me find item 4 here.
Circling it.
Craig has it on the screen.
He's
if you
pointing
need
at
it.
it. It's a 0.
Yeah, but my question is don't we have to come out of work session?
No,
No.
we just roll right along.
Okay, fine. So let's have our regular meeting. And the first item on the agenda is president's announcements. And I actually have 2. First of all, I want to recognize and remind everyone out there about the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society fundraiser that 3 of our high school juniors are doing until the end of February. The students are Ava Singh, Caitlin Leiden, and Alexa Volweiler. This team is called the Pirates of the Caribbean, Caribbean, and their fundraiser is important to me, particularly as I have a very close friend who has lymphoma. He has a blood cancer, and he's done well with it so far, but there's just, unfortunately today, there's just no guarantee. So if anybody wants any more information on the fundraiser, You can go to the high school website and look up LLS fundraiser, or I've got the website where you can donate. It's https://events.lls.org/NOH/SOY21/Brexville. And if I said that too fast, I'm sorry, but you can get in other ways too. Mr. Oss puts out a monthly announcement letter, and it's in there. So that's number one, and I encourage everybody to donate a little bit anyway, if not more. I know I am. Second item on my agenda for my announcements is Ellen and I both want to recognize Mark and Kathleen for their leadership of the board during the past year. It has been a very difficult year, and I know all of us are thankful that the year is over. So Mark and Kathleen, thank you for the hours of work that you both, extra hours of work that you both put in to the board leadership last year. It really is deeply appreciated, and I can't tell you how much I myself personally appreciate it. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Fred.
You're welcome. Good luck.
I'm hopeful that Elle and I are going to have a little bit easier job than the two of you had.
We are too.
Okay, next item on the agenda, item 6, board member committee reports. Financial liaison audit committee.
No updates.
We should be scheduling soon, I think, to go over the audit
The
because
audit
it's
result,
done. So probably early February.
Okay, permanent improvement committee, Ellen and Mark.
I think Mr. Code's here and Craig is going to kind of address this in his update.
Board
Okay.
update letter or the long update? That'll determine who's talking.
The short of it now is that we have an agenda item later in our meeting that is going to talk about a lot of HVAC work that we're going to be doing. And, we're making progress on other fronts too with roofing and more to come later in the meeting.
Next, the board policy committee. We haven't met. I don't know when we have no meeting scheduled at the moment.
Typically, we get board policy updates in September and February during the school year. So we should be receiving an update here shortly, and we'll be scheduling a meeting probably early March.
Okay, thank you, Joelle. Sustainability committee, Ellen.
Which we have not done anything, sadly, so no updates.
I have a question. So Fred, let me just ask Craig. So the audit committee, I got it because I was president last year. It came to my Yahoo email. Did that go to everybody?
Yes.
I think
Did
so.
everybody get a copy of the audit report? Is that
Not
correct?
the audit. Well,
No, Kathleen, you sent me a copy.
I sent you a copy, but I didn't know if Ellen or
Maybe they did
Brittany
not.
got a copy.
you guys didn't
I
get the
did
copy.
not.
It's been filed, so it's available publicly.
Okay. And I'd be happy to just send that on. I wasn't sure, and it was odd that it came to my Yahoo.
Well,
That is kinda strange.
maybe, Craig, maybe you could send it to the board via
Yeah.
link to it, because it's just a link.
Yep.
You can
Thank
pull
you.
it up online.
Thank
That
you.
way we all officially
Sorry
get
about
it.
Thanks, Kathleen.
It was a good audit, by the way.
It looked like it. I read the whole thing. I had some time.
You can't skim it, and that's what I attempted to do.
Wow. Don't break
Yeah.
any more bones.
All right, item 7, district committee reports. Transportation Appeals Committee,
None.
Cuyahoga Valley Career Center report. Mr. Gilbright is not in attendance.
No, and for the future, I always tried every month to contact Joelle, remind her, or contact Jim myself and ask if he had a report. So you might want one of you two, might want to do that, but, and then he will send it or tell you if he's coming or not, so you'll know. But I always did that before the board meeting because he doesn't know. He's not on the same cycle.
Okay, well, I will make a note here to contact him prior to the meeting. All right. Safety and security meeting report. Ellen and Kathleen.
No updates at this time.
Schools Foundation report. Brittany.
I just have one update. The Schools Foundation is gearing up for their annual fundraiser to support teacher grants and classroom grants. The event will be held on March 11th at 7 p.m. If you are familiar with previous events, it has been a sip and support fundraiser that has been paired with a online auction. This year, due to COVID, the organization has chosen to do a telethon. So individuals can tune in to either YouTube or the group's Facebook channel and watch that event. Registration and online auction information will be available at bbhsf.org.
Thank you, Brittany. PSO report, me. I have one item to report. The middle school PSO will be having a virtual wine tasting with 750 milliliter to benefit the auditorium. That's on February 19th, 2021 from 6 to 7:50 p.m. If interested, you can go to the middle school BBHMS PSO page and get the details. PSO Council will meet a week from tomorrow for the first time in 2021. So a more complete report will be at our next meeting. Other board member reports? Hearing none. Next item is item 8, superintendent's announcements.
Thank you, Fred. Item A is just our pre-K 5 building project update report that we just post. We don't necessarily go over it, but you can read through it. And if you haven't been to the site, I strongly encourage you that you go. It's amazing and very exciting to see this building take shape. So we're on schedule, so that's still good. The building's still scheduled to open at the end of April. So looking forward to watching this progress over the next year. Board Recognition Month, where we recognize our board for their wonderful leadership. And we have some certificates here for you to thank you for a job well done. And thank you for your service and your leadership for our districts.
Thank you.
Here, Fred.
If you don't mind, Joelle, you can give mine to Craig. He's got some things that he needs to send out to me to sign.
Great, thank you.
And we wanted you all to look good, so we have this new decal for our meeting, which hopefully you guys have enjoyed or like, to kind of reinforce our culture, our portrait of a graduate and stuff.
Yes. And my
Nice little color.
second presentation, I would like to honor, I'm sitting down and I'll get back up because of the microphone. I'd like to honor Maria Schneider. She was recognized this year or recently as the Shape America Teacher of the Year Midwest region. And she was Ohio Teacher of the Year and was able to apply for the Midwest region award because of that designation, and now gets to move on to compete nationally to be the National Teacher of the Year. So we are so proud of you, and I am personally proud of you for, always proud of you. So we'd like to recognize you and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Maria. Congratulations.
Congratulations. That's exciting. You get to go on to compete in nationals.
With some great candidates, so.
I'm sure.
But it's
We're lucky to have you.
Okay, item number 9, treasurer's announcements.
Fred's moving quick. I just have a couple of announcements. We did kind of have our first pre-agenda meeting. So just so everyone, I guess I got deemed to notify that this was the last meeting, just because we're meeting in person, that we're going to do the Google Forms for public participation. So we're not going to do that after this meeting, but kind of giving everyone notice that public participation will be done in person. So that was one of my announcements. Unless something
You
else.
still
unless something else
submit it
changes.
in writing? Can you still submit something in writing to the board or no?
Do they? I don't know if they did they do that
I
before?
was thinking, is that part of our language when we say participation or no?
Well, but I mean, before COVID, they would
Right.
come and go and, step up to the podium. I think what we're saying is we're going to go back to that, obviously, with
what it
all
was
social
before.
distancing and mask
Correct.
guidelines in effect, but, you know, we're not getting something, so anybody who wants to can come. So what would happen if we had a topic where we anticipate?
We'll move the
we
meeting,
would
of course,
move
yeah.
it? Okay,
Yep.
so we would maybe be it in the auditorium or something.
Or the high
and
school
then-
media center, yep.
And so, but people could still show up and just distance and then
Yes.
Yes,
up and say what they want to say.
yes, unless something changes with COVID.
Yeah.
Hopefully, as more people get vaccinated, we see those numbers keep coming down, but fingers crossed. The other things I wanted just to like briefly talk about is, because we do actually have some good news to share. It's ESSER 2, but most people refer to ESSER as really CARES. So I call it CARES 2.0 because people, I think, understand that more than ESSER. So we are going to be getting some additional funding that'll be coming in the next couple of weeks. So our team's going to be putting together how we'll look at how we're going to make that plan basically for what we'll use that money for. But one of the good things is that we used the first round for a lot of technology. And one of the other things we can do is look at even more or additional HVAC work to improve airflow and things like that in the middle school and high school, because obviously the new building will have a lot of those things already in it. So we're going to put together a plan. We have to submit it to the state. So that'll be coming, I think, within the next 2 weeks. We have to be submitting it or be close to submitting it. So we'll be working together to do that. But it's $900. So it's a substantial chunk of change. So we may use it for other things as well that it will qualify. And then the governor obviously issued an executive order. So we're getting a little bit of money back from the state funding. He made additional cuts to other entities, but he is going to put more money back into education, which we're very thankful for. So for us, it's about $289,000. So that's some good news to share, I guess.
Which, Craig, just to clarify, so the application needs to be submitted before the ESSER money is released.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Fred, I have one more announcement, if that's okay.
Sure.
I just wanted to give an update on the vaccine process and what our district is going through, and just to keep people updated as to what that looks like. We've been getting some email questions about that. So the vaccinations for school personnel is being run through all of the ESCs throughout the state of Ohio, so the educational service centers throughout the state of Ohio. This is a different lot of vaccines, so it's not the same vaccine that the current 1B group. This is specifically reserved for all educators. So they pulled this out of the regular giving out the vaccine that is specifically for educators. We had to submit a survey to our ESC to say, you know, how many people are getting the vaccine and all of that information, not specific people, but just about how many. They are in turn waiting to hear from the Ohio Department of Health, where they've assigned us to a very specific location on a specific day. So anybody in our district who would like to get that vaccine will have to go to this. We're scheduled to find out that information this Friday. So once we have that information, we will be sharing it out with our community. We'll be sharing it out with our parents, because how they are scheduling this is on that very specific day. That's the day you have to go. So being in school 5 days a week, we don't have an asynchronous day, or we don't have a day where we don't have kids, where many districts might still have a 4-day week where they have that asynchronous day. What that means for us, our children and our community, is that we might have to have an asynchronous learning day on the day that our staff is to receive that vaccine. So that's why we want to get it out there as quickly as possible to our parents, so they know. We want our teachers to know, so they can plan for that asynchronous day. And what I mean by that, it's different than a remote learning, because if all teachers have to go to this location, in theory, they're not going to be able to deliver remote instruction. It would be that the teachers the night before might set up activities, put them into their Google Classroom, and then those are the activities that the kids would work on during that day that our staff goes for vaccination. I just want to make sure that the community understands that and knows that we're not canceling school for a day, but we do have to go on a very specific day, or we miss that window. And it's really important that our staff have that opportunity to get vaccinated as soon as possible. More information to come on Friday, though.
Are they going to do the follow-up shot the same way, or do they not know that yet?
As of right, 5 school districts, and other counties where they have 9, they've already gone through that first round, and then you've got some that are, already receiving that second round. That is our understanding, that they will roll out the second dose in the same manner. It might be because it's after March, maybe it falls over spring break. We just don't know those dates yet, so we just have to remain to be seen.
Okay, back to Craig. Any more treasurer's announcements?
No, that's all.
Okay. Item number 10, community communications, hearing of the public. Persons wishing to address the Board of Education may do so at this point. No formal action will be taken on subjects that are not included on this agenda until the board has had an opportunity to study them. Comments regarding personnel must be submitted in writing through the office of the superintendent. In order for the board to complete the planned agenda in an effective and efficient manner and to provide sufficient opportunities for members of the public to be heard, hearing of the public shall be limited to a maximum of 30 minutes, during which each speaker shall be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. Craig, you want to read us?
Yes, we have one comment that came in today. So this is from, there was only one, that's why I put it up here this time. Is it Kristen Cast? Can you please comment on the district's protocol direction if teachers are attending school sick and with symptoms and have either been tested for COVID and are waiting results, or are going to get tested that day and then are confirmed positive with COVID? They have provided virus exposure to the children. If a teacher is sick enough that they think they have COVID and need to be tested for COVID, should they be coming to school that day to teach in person? What is the district's policy on this? If we are asking the children to stay home if they feel symptoms or awaiting COVID test results, is the same direction true for the staff? Is this being reinforced? Thank you.
Okay.
That's the only one that we have.
Okay, thank you. And item number 11, other board business. A resolution for third grade reading guarantee. B, roll call.
You need a motion on A.
I'm sorry. I need a motion on item E.
Second.
Any discussion?
Any discussion at all?
Yeah, I think we do need some discussion. Before we get into discussion, just regarding the person who asked all those questions in the hearing of the public, I would suggest that they email that maybe to Joelle, and then answers can be gotten via email. So, and for those people watching hearing of the public, most of that is not meant to be a dialogue back and forth where it's an open Q&A. So if you have questions, it's best to communicate them via email to our staff, and somebody can get back to you.
Okay, regarding the third grade reading guarantee, I believe Dr. Martin is going to give us a presentation on it.
Yeah, he's teeing it up.
That is correct. Let me get the presentation up here. Okay, good evening. While I want to be as brief as possible, I really do not want to compromise a thoroughness and understanding regarding such an important topic. So, okay, so just some quick outcomes. I really want to focus on getting an understanding on the legislation regarding the third grade reading guarantee, understanding the historical background of the third grade reading guarantee, and then understanding our current practices to support literacy learning in BBHCSD. Okay, so I'm sure you've heard of the third grade reading guarantee. You've probably read about it, but this is directly from the ODE website. Ohio's third grade reading guarantee is a program to identify students from kindergarten through grade 3 that are behind in reading. Schools will provide help and support to make sure students are on track for reading success by the end of third grade. We all know that third grade, pivotal grade, it's very important that by that time students are reading proficiently. Will have effects on them later on in their academic careers. Okay, just a brief history of the third grade reading guarantee. I can't believe 9 years have gone by. I remember it was enacted in 2012, almost a decade ago, but it has undergone several revisions. Senate Bill 316, that established cut scores. We're going to talk a little bit about that in the next few slides. RIMS, that's reading improvement. QT, and the reason why I just struck that out was at that time in 2012, they required every single pre-K or every single K through third grade teacher to have a K-12 reading endorsement, unfunded mandate and untenable, so they had to rescind it. Senate Bill 555 established the K-3 report card ratings, and we're going to talk about that at the end, parent notification and intervention. Senate Bill 21 established alternative pathways. So if you do not pass the third grade reading guarantee, you have other options. Terra Nova, MAP, Iowa, iReady. The last two are the ones that we use. And Senate Bill 64. I'm not familiar with this one. I think it's very rare. There are options in the biannual operating budget for bonus payments to districts. I think it's very rare though. Okay, so fast forward a little bit here. House Bill 409. No district shall retain a student in the third grade who does not meet the promotion score of 683 or reading subscore of 46 on the OST, that's the Ohio State test, for third grade English language arts if the student's principal and reading teacher agree that other evaluations of the student's skills in reading demonstrate the student is academically prepared to be promoted to the fourth grade. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with. So this is what historically we've done in BBHCSD. If a student does not meet the following, so a student in third grade has two opportunities. You have a fall test, spring test, and ELA. If one of those two tests or both of those tests do not meet the cut score, which is established by the ODE, not us, of 683, or the reading subscore of 46, and does not pass the cut score, or achieve the cut score on the Iowa, which is also established by the ODE and the vendor, and iReady, established by the ODE and the vendor, then this is what we do in BBHCSD. The student moves to fourth grade. We start intensive literacy instruction in both third and fourth grade, and retest in October with the third grade ELA assessment. Now, I will say we have a very, very good track record. I think we have a system that works when we do move them to fourth grade because they do get targeted support, and that's the next slide. So I pulled some historical data. I can only go back to 2014, 2015, which was our biggest year. We had 3 students that did not pass the third grade reading guarantee, and 2 of which transferred in April. And I'm not sure if that was a couple days before the test or what happened. So 3 students moved to fourth grade, but in October of 2014, those 3 students passed. Now you'll see there's a note on there that those 2 students, and I'm not sure if it was the 2 students that moved in, did eventually qualify for special education. And then you see the pattern here. So 2015, 16, 2 students didn't pass in the fall or the spring, but passed in the fall in fourth grade with intensive intervention in 2015. 18, 19, we were down to 1, last year 0, and this year is, we'll see. So that's
The fall scores though, right, for the last one?
I'm sorry, what?
You have the fall scores right now,
We have the fall score, that's all we have for right now.
so you know what that number is right now, or,
Yes,
okay.
I do. I don't have it up here. I can get it for you though. Want it?
Was it larger than what you're seeing in that? And I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Well, we have, we
You don't have to tell me the number. Is it?
we have a lower than normal participation rate.
Got
across the board. So it's difficult to make some generalizations right now, but
It's the challenging of testing remotely and all that.
yeah, parents, yeah.
Dr.
Okay.
Martin, if I can just interject with one question quickly, and actually it's to your point about lower participation. How are we currently assessing our students if they've opted out of this testing?
Well, don't forget, so many of those students are online learners.
Right.
And we have to respect the right of the parent not to send them in. So there's still a lot of learning going on remotely and a lot of rich assessments. Those teachers are constantly assessing the students, both formally and informally. We still have iReady, we still have the BAS, we still have other data points that we can use to gain a fairly good understanding and picture of where those students are, particularly in literacy.
Thank you.
Okay, so current practices. Right now we use iReady. That's the diagnostic to determine if they're on track, and that's fall to fall. That's the vendor we have chosen. We do have some consistency with that. We've been using that for the last several years. If a student does not score in the on-track range with iReady in the fall, the student then is placed on a RIMP, a Reading Improvement Monitoring Plan. And this is what is included. So the student will get guided reading, small group instruction, which is really, really important, increased reading time, phonemic awareness and phonemic decoding. And the last one down there, I believe, is sight word instruction. Now, the question is always asked, if a student somehow, does well on iReady, and it's hard now because iReady was taken at home for the mid-year, so take that with a grain of salt. If a student does not score on, or if a student does score on track, but is presenting to have difficulties in the classroom in terms of literacy, can we still issue a RIMP? And the answer is absolutely yes, and we do. That's a way for us to monitor them. That student might qualify for reading intervention, but still do okay on iReady.
So like the difficulty is with remote learning, the children aren't unmuting themselves. The children aren't reading the way they normally would read in the classroom. Some of them, I don't know if this is the case here, but are some of them, attendance is difficult in some cases. So these interventions that we normally do with RIMP is required by law, but we're not as able to do these interventions if there's not this willingness. Plus we have a platform that has severe limitations. Like, how are we making those interventions? And in some cases, are we finding it just not being able to happen just because, there's a lot of reasons.
That's a good point. I will say that our teachers have done a heroic job since March 17th. You look at what we've been through, complete remote, hybrid,
Right.
remote, all in. Our teachers are doing the very best they possibly can. Yes.
But have you find that you're hearing that difficulty, that we're not quite sure in some cases, if those children are doing that work on their own? Because they're not in front of us. They weren't in front of us and they're still not in front of us, some of them.
Absolutely. If we can't be absolutely certain, just like we can't be absolutely certain when they're in person, that big brother or sister's helping them at home, we don't know. And it makes it more complicated when we have, what we've been through with all of the inconsistencies with the pandemic.
Wi-Fi, I just want to
Yeah.
rest of the board, because you and I, we're living this challenge and we've lived it, but it's difficult sometimes for others to understand that when we make these statements, we can't say for sure. In some cases, my high intelligent kids, they're coming in the 25th percentile on MAP. So they're not even spending time taking the test. So I'm just saying.
Yes, analyzing some of the
Normal
data. Yes.
practices have been effective, but this year we cannot say for sure that what we're seeing is the way it is.
Analyzing some of the data, there do appear to be pockets of irregularities, but that's because of the inconsistencies.
Yeah.
Okay. So some continued support, multi-tiered support. As you know, we have a huge investment in our K-5 ELA adoption from last year, our comprehensive literacy framework that's in the classroom. Our teachers, again, rolling up their sleeves, doing the work, learning a new adoption. And it is a responsive literacy. It's responsive to the student needs, and they're learning it. But that's a tier 1, and they're able to do some of those interventions that we just spoke about in the classroom. We also have reading intervention, which is 30 minutes daily. So that's 5 days a week. And then, there might be a tier 3 situation where it's even more intensive, more specific, and targeted reading instruction.
So I have a question with reading intervention. Is the interventions person popping in with the teacher, or are they having breakout rooms where they are with those group of children that are identified?
Both. So they're really, really trying to do what is tailor fit to the needs of the students, because that's what our comprehensive literacy framework aims to do, to respond to the learner needs. So it is both. It's not exclusive. If it works for some students to pull out for 5 days, they'll pull out for 5 days. For other students, it might make sense to push in and provide services in the classroom.
So in asynchronous learning, you have these students that may be struggling at home, and that intervention specialist, well, the Title I specialist is popping in. So we have a classroom of kids.
With breakout rooms.
Got it.
So there could be
Yeah,
one-on-one.
but it's not as intense. What my point is I'm not sure. I'm just trying to get across. This is not the intent of the way we could have done it in the past, where we're doing pull-out or small groups sitting at a table where I'm concentrating on those students. We're not able to do that this year with those struggling learners. And I don't know that we've actually identified some of the kids, I would argue, that actually are struggling, because we can't say for sure. I'm just I'm telling you my viewpoint. If you disagree, that's totally fine.
Yeah, to speak in certainties in a pandemic, and I said this a few times tonight, I don't think I'm prepared to do that. That's very challenging, because to say, yeah, we are meeting the needs of every single student in the district to 100%, we're trying our best. But again, kudos to our teachers, our administrators, our parents, our students. They're trying their best, and they know how difficult this is. Okay, so the report card, and this is specifically with the improving at-risk K-3 readers. There's some highlights here, and I have presented the last couple of years at the board meeting when we get the scores back regarding this topic. Very, very complex. I mean, I think I joked and I said it's rocket science. It is rocket science. And if you want to stay till midnight, I can explain to you how this grade is derived.
Sorry.
No takers. But it's very complex. And I think, Joelle, you served on a committee. You know that this is a very challenging part of the report card that is not user-friendly and accessible to the general public. Exclusively uses on-track, off-track, and the 3rd grade OST to derive the grade. So it's fall to fall, and we are tracked on how many kids come off track. And if you're in 3rd grade and you're off track in the fall, and you get a 700, which is proficient, on either the fall or the spring in 3rd grade, then you come off track. Again, fall to fall, inherently, I believe that there are some complications with that. Does it account for summer setback? It seems more intuitive to do a fall to spring type of growth, but that's what we have. A couple of years ago, I did an analysis of the 611 districts in Ohio and found large discrepancies, meaning there were high-performing districts like us that got an NR, not reported. If you dig down deeper, you find out why. And it says because less than 5% of their incoming kindergartners were off track. Well, that's difficult to comprehend because I don't think that's much to do with the school district. 5%, only less than 5% were off track. And so the entire report card in that area got an NR. So it's it's baffling that, we're trying to do right by kids. We're using assessments as consistent as we possibly can in a pandemic. And pre-pandemic, we definitely were. And yet we get dinged on the report card for this grade.
But
So-
there will be no report card this year. We are being held harmless. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have, so far, they're not going to cease the standardized test, but there will be no grades
And we'll
supposedly.
have the assessment.
Mhm.
We can look at that. It's not going to be if somebody's still, we're not on 1.0. It's not shared attribution. It's just
No.
sitting there for our.
Purely diagnostic, that's the
That's right.
way it should be. So yeah, it just comes into question the validity. So, does this really measure? Does it accurately measure what it intends to measure? And I would argue that particularly no, right now in a pandemic, and I have my questions pre-pandemic as well. So I just want to close with some mental health and social emotional considerations. And I just a couple nights ago, I think I pulled this off of the APA website. And, you can look down at the article was student mental health during and after COVID-19. And I'll just read it. The pandemic itself has caused much worry, stress, and grief. These stressors can cause mental health challenges for anyone and can cause acute symptoms to appear for people who may experience pre-existing mental health challenges. And, like we were talking before, we haven't had anything consistent since March 17th. I think we're on the right road right now. But who's to say these things aren't going to surface with children? And I just think that at this time, we don't focus on retention, we focus on support, supporting our teachers, supporting our learners, supporting our families, supporting our schools as best we possibly can to maximize the literacy learning at this juncture. So it's my 2 cents. Questions, discussion?
So let me ask you this. Here's an idea that some districts do. Because we know that we haven't been able to do the interventions that we normally would have done with the Fidelity. We tried our best. Everybody has tried their best. Could we offer in the summertime for those children who are off track or we suspect are off track, a summer program where they have the opportunity to come for 4 weeks? And I know districts, there's care. I know we have other ideas for our CARES money. Could we use that? Could we use title funds? We've already allocated that, so doubtfully that. But is there other things we could do that at least if we're going to go ahead with this waiver, that we could still make sure that we're addressing those setbacks for those children?
I mean, that's a lot. And I totally agree, because we have to continually address, not just now, next year. This is for years to come, the learning gaps. We have to. And Joel and I have talked about this. We do have a vision of some type of summer reading institute, which would bring in both at-risk as well as other students that would be willing to participate. It is massive, but it is something that I have been thinking about. I need to do some long-range planning and financial budgeting. But you're absolutely right. We've got to address learning gaps as we move forward.
Well, can we do it this summer? Too short of a time financially? Is that too short of a time for you to plan? Because if I vote on this waiver, I want to know what we're doing. I want to be assured that we're pushing these kids on. I know we can cluster group them in 4th grade possibly, and we're going to have attempts, but I don't know how bad things might be. So what are we going to do with what we do know with those kids? And I'm wondering, is this summer too? And we're not talking a large amount of kids, but we're talking.
Well, I think learning gaps exist, high, low, medium. There's a lot going on out there. I don't know if I can commit financially. I can plan, but I don't know if I can commit financially to some type of summer reading institute right now.
But you could plan.
I could plan all night. I mean,
I get it.
I love planning.
He does. He loves
No,
to
I
plan.
get that. I guess I'm bringing this to the attention of the board.
Wouldn't that be something that could be covered under the CARES 2 money?
It's probably something that if it's covered and for what that would probably cost and how much we're getting, I think there's just a discussion we have to have as we create that plan. But I mean, again, I can clearly see that benefit for what that's going to cost. So, and probably what it's going to cost actually in my head, but I think that's something we should just talk about and how we create that plan. Like, I'm,
Salaries. I know that, at least the models that I've seen, it's the $24 an hour. I forget what we.
well,
do.
ours has we have a summer school rate in our contract, correct? So it's
But
very
it's not
specific.
normal staffing hours is what I'm saying. There's a
Correct.
lot of other things
Mhm.
that aren't going to look like a normal school year. So when you're thinking of putting these educated people in front of the kids, it's not the same cost. I mean, I don't know what it is, but it's not this exorbitant amount that
Right,
some might think it is.
right.
So when we're talking about CARES money and allocating it towards some things, I'm just saying, bringing to the attention of this board that we could support something if Mr. Martin thought that that was a good course, or, you could plan that. We could do that.
Well,
And
and
still do this waiver and still do the waiver.
And I think that, and we'll be having that discussion soon with Mrs. Tomasetti, that we'll probably have some savings this year with ESY based on how it was run last year. So, and that was a very costly program for us last summer, that we'll probably have some savings there that we can easily also roll.
Certainly can plan, and as Dave said, we've talked about this in the past, of coming up with more of a robust summer school program, not school per se, but some type of reading, institute, and we've talked about that. But I just want to be clear that, this waiver to retain, we've never had to use it. So they're two separate things, right? So we can have a summer school and we can provide what it can look however it wants. This waiver is waiving the ability, the retention piece of the third grade reading guarantee to say, if they don't meet all of those things that Dave said, shared with you, they don't meet the cut scores, they don't pass the Iowa, they don't do that. As you can see from our data, we've never had to retain anyone. We've always met that. So this is really just a safety net for us. It's not for all districts, for sure, but for us, it's just a safety net. And, I think in addition, the data that we have and the research that we've looked at, the impacts that retention has academically and on mental health are far worse than looking at, intervening and running a summer school. And so, for multiple reasons, you never want to retain a child. You want to do everything you can to keep from retaining. So just by waiving this, we would never stop doing what we're doing to educate kids. Retention is not the answer, even for kids who don't meet that cut score. Retention is never the answer. Actually, it does more harm on their mental health than it does good. And there's no evidence to show that it's academically
I would
successful.
disagree. I've seen studies that say the exact opposite. How to read is far worse, and it only gets worse after fourth grade because now you're reading to learn.
Sure.
So that's the first opportunity. And if we are pushing children on, and this is not a normal year, but if we're going to give our Brecksville stamp of approval, this isn't, I know we've never done that, but these parents are expecting us that these kids can read in fourth grade. And if we're not doing something different this summer, recognizing that this is not normal at all, and now we're going to get rid of this waiver, which we've never had to execute. And I get in an urban school, this is a mass mess because you're going to have a whole massive group of kids. This isn't going to be so huge. And so I worry if we don't put a parachute in, we're just going to move them on, get rid of this one guarantee that the state has given these parents that, listen, these kids are going on and they can read. These parents, I'd be so angry. And some of them, they are so caught up in what's actually going on that I don't know if they would notice that this child's out of whack because some are in Zoom, some are here. They can't really have that benchmark they normally would have had, nor can the teacher. So the idea of getting rid of that one parachute, which we've never had to use, scares me. I don't like it. And if we're not going to commit ourselves to something different this summer financially, when we have money, CARES money, that we could be using that way, we're choosing to use it other ways. I don't feel good about that. And so unless this board agrees to something different and supporting that this summer, I'm parachute that guarantee.
Our teachers parachute in every single day.
I get
They do.
it.
And
I get it.
we got to put faith in there because and we got to see how the numbers shake out. Again, I could plan on a dime, and I want to support as much intervention as I possibly can. But I mean,
It's nobody's fault and the
Yeah.
teachers are doing a bang up job, but
and
there are
have been,
just some kids, and they're the lower ones, that don't have the same support as those other. Trying to grab and make sure that before we're shoving them forward in the institution, we've done something to recognize that we need to do a little bit more this time. And that's what the care, one of the uses of the CARES money was to create these other opportunities for those students. So when we're choosing to use it on HVAC or something, we're an educational institution. So I'm challenging us. Okay, this is fine. It's not going to be huge. Let's use the CARES money for a summer program for these students to make sure we've done our job.
Well, and I guess there are gaps up and down in every grade level. I mean, this just happens to be amplified because it's a third grade reading guarantee. So it was kind of a do not pass go, right? A litmus test that says, look, you've got to meet a certain set of criteria before you move on. So, this is what's brought it to the forefront to say, well, now, the state has passed legislation to say you can grant a resolution that allows the superintendent to in essence, waive the third grade reading guarantee in certain circumstances. So it's, it's another option that lets you try to take the best situation for the students individually and figure out, does it make sense to apply the reading guarantee and hold them back or move them forward? But I mean, let's be clear, there's reading gaps up and down K-12. I mean, this isn't like a third grade thing where there's reading. I understand that reading is a critical thing, hence the third grade reading guarantee, because you got to have those reading skills set. But I mean, we're going to be faced with trying to close gaps up and down.
We will, but
With
this
the
is
grade
like a
level.
math, like the way the curriculum switches in fourth grade. It's just this, it's what we talked about with kindergarten. It's just offering more for our parents when we institute that they had, none of us had hoped for it this year, even to the best of our ability. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, that's exactly the reason you would not want to retain a kid. I mean, they're dealing with so much with their mental health. The last thing you'd want to do is, say that they can come to school and, oh, by the way, all of your friends are moving on and you're not. I mean, we need to intervene. I don't think anyone is in disagreement. We need to provide some additional interventions, but retaining them would be the most awful thing you could do for these children's mental health, especially in a pandemic that, the only because we're still supposed to test, that's still in legislation that this waiver is addressing, is the retention piece. It's saying that we will not retain your child, or you are supporting that we won't retain anyone based on if they don't meet those scores. That's all this is saying.
No,
This
I
is
get
not.
it. I get it. And it's to provide a cushion. This, in my mind, is providing a cushion for urban schools where that number is going to be huge. In Brecksville, Broadview Heights, this is not a lot of students. And the thing is that, those students, I would argue with you, it's far worse not to be able to read. I've worked with those students. It's far worse in fourth grade, far more mentally challenging not to be able to read. So I'm not saying it's not difficult with retaining, and I'm not for necessarily doing that as much as if we're going to go do this, let's tell our parents we're doing something extra for them this summer. Okay, we recognize that you're.
And I agree with that. I think I don't have any issue with doing the resolution, but I want to have that fallback. I want to have something that we can assure our parents that we're not going to let their kids pass on and then struggle.
Well, I'm just going to point out, the resolution does specifically have this pull out for unless the principal of the school building in which a student is enrolled and the student's reading teacher agree that the student is reading below grade level and is not prepared to be promoted to the fourth grade. So there is a parachute built right into this waiver. And I'm not disagreeing with anything anybody had to say. I'm fine, helping kids over the summer and using some of the CARES 2 money for that. But there is a parachute built right into this already.
to me, that's not a parachute. To me, the parachute is what's gonna save that kid. And that's that additional support over the summer or additional support in the fall even. So they pass the fall reading test. But at any rate, I think we need to pass the resolution, but I think we need to make sure that our parents know that if their kid needs help, he'll get it.
Well, and to your point, Fred, I guess I would expect and hope that whether or not we pass this resolution, we still do everything within our power to bring all of our students across the board
I agree.
and close the gap, especially the reading part, which is so critical to the future success. in
Sure.
these years. So this resolution, again, like I said, whether you pass it or not, I would hope that wouldn't change our behavior on what we're trying to do to bring all of our students up to grade level.
I agree, Mark.
So, I mean, just for my own, so I can know how to vote on this, are we going to commit this summer to funding something that Mr. Martin creates for these students that do have this gap? Because if we are not going to commit to that, then I cannot pass this waiver because that's all that kid's going to get. That's my question.
I think the administration needs to present us with something to show what they're proposing and what the cost is before we can commit to it.
So
To
do
just
we have
say
to
we're
pass this now?
gonna commit to a blank check funding of something this summer. I'm not sure that makes sense.
I'm pretty confident that we can work on this as a team for the summer, in my opinion, I guess.
Deadline, timeline? I mean,
Tomorrow, if you could have this ready by tomorrow, that'd be great.
Yeah. tonight.
Cup of
I'll
coffee.
expect your email at about 11:30, asking
I guess in the
questions.
morning.
It's not like it has to be reinvented. It exists in lots of
I know.
districts. I'm not saying it's not easy, okay, and I understand the burden, but I'm saying if this board agrees to, and I'm not saying a blank check, but I've seen what those programs run at. I've seen their numbers, and they're not something that's that large, okay? So and again, if we can just commit to trying to get those kids who we cannot say for sure, are ready for fourth grade, then I'm good with a waiver. I'm good with that. And that's what I'm asking the board to do.
Well, and this is January. We have a regular meeting every month. I mean, why not throw it on the agenda next February and let's circle back and say, did we make any progress? Throw it on the next month, March. I mean, we can keep this active on our agenda until we get some more detail around what plans we think might work and what the cost might be and how it would work.
I mean, that's fine, but as we say, we want to look at data. We need to have some time to get some data points because right now we're making assumptions that these kids are not on track.
Right.
We need data points, and our next spring round of iReady data is March, April. When do
We have to have it done by April 30th.
April 30th. I mean, if you're running a camp, paying teachers, and it's 5 kids, there might be a better way to intervene than running a full summer program. I'd much rather, before we come to you, have some data points to say, this is how many kids we're talking about. This is what it's going to cost. This is what we'd like to do. We might not know that until later. Yes, and it could be later in the summer. It doesn't have to be like right in June. It could be, actually, when we talked about doing the Reading Institute, we talked about doing in August, like a pre-entry program, right, that butts up right to the start of the school year as being a more appropriate time to run something like that to really pre-assess skills and see where kids are and then help drive what the instruction then looks like in the classroom. So if I would like a little more runway on this, just so we can have some data points to talk to you about.
Well, is it okay that we let you have the runway and bring us back the information and then we pass the resolution?
He means now.
To pass the resolution now? Yeah, are you suggesting to wait on the resolution?
I'm suggesting either. I mean, what, do we have options?
Pass this resolution today? Well, January, I'm just asking.
But we're not going to have data until the end of April.
No, but here's the other thing, and I'm just asking, Mr. Martin, that window can be changed for iReady. It's meant to, isn't it, we use map data to predict OST results. Is that correct? So when was the last time we gave we use iReady? When was the last time? Do we do it in the winter time?
Yeah, we have a fall, winter, and spring benchmark. Winter benchmark was
Right.
December 1st to December 20th, but
So
again, it
you
was
have the
taken.
winter one, so you can see the trajectory. I mean, it's pretty accurate of where you're heading in March.
All of those were taken at home.
Gotcha.
So, again,
Yeah.
I want to help kids. I want to support kids. I want to give as much support and intervention as we possibly can. But as a team, I think we put our heads together. We're going to need a little time to do it, and we'll come up with something.
So if we have data by the end of April, if we brought this to the May board meeting, is that enough time to implement programs in the summer?
Especially if it's going to happen in August, that butts up to the start of the school year rather than, butting up to the end of this school year. So for sure.
And to Kathleen's point, or in question, if we postpone this resolution until then, is this a resolution needed ahead of that time?
It needs to be ahead of, because if you end up taking the test in, during the testing window, which is mid-March to April, it's about a month long, and we get those results back typically midsummer. We then, if there's any kids that don't pass, we right away intervene. We try to give them the Iowa. There's very specific dates during the summer. So yes, we would have to pass this before, because it will drive then somewhat of what happens to them in the fall.
Well, we could put it off for another month. These conversations should be happening all year. And if they are coming out of nowhere, shame on us, which they wouldn't do. So us pushing it off for another month where you guys can talk about this.
But I'm still struggling the tie to this versus what you're asking us to do. What you're asking us to do would be done regardless.
No, it isn't done. We haven't ever done this summer thing before, and other districts have.
But we were talking about it. I mean, Dave and I have been talking about this, doing this pre-COVID. Like, let's get a summer school program together. Let's do that. But retaining kids, by the nature of retaining kids, does not work. And it would be horrible to retain kids right now in their mental health in a pandemic. I mean, this is a separate issue of retention versus doing a summer school. We can look at doing a summer school. We can have data. We can give you numbers. Whether or not we choose to implement a retention of a kid during decision. And and there's no good data to show that retention helps anyone. Just because you repeat information and somebody hears something twice doesn't make them learn it better. You have to intervene and instruct differently. That's what helps kids learn better. It's not just a repeat of the information.
I get that this isn't a normal year. It's not been normal delivery.
But
so in this case, retention I am a mental health advocate, okay? But I would tell you that it's far worse not to be able to read, because you never catch up. So that's all I'm looking for, is a plan, a solid plan, before I go put my vote on something that I think might be the only thing these parents might have, these kids might have. That's all I'm asking for, is a deferral. And I know there's no reason why we can't defer for another month, so you guys can talk, and then we could, at least for me personally, I could vote knowing that there's something in place for those kids.
But I guess what are we going to know a month from now? What we talked through here was, we're not going to get credible data until the end of April. So we're not going to know how many students might be at risk and need intervention. So you can't design a summer program until you know what your numbers are. To Joelle's point, if there's only 5, you're not going to roll out a whole comprehensive summer program, necessarily for, that could handle 100 kids if you only have 5. You're going to tailor it to.
Programs that do have 5. I taught them.
I'm not saying that there's not, Kathleen. I'm saying you're asking for program details. And if I understand, how many students are at risk right now? Because while we've given the test, they've been taken at home. Is that correct? Mostly.
Yes.
So,
December.
so that's questionable about how accurate are those results. So while we have numbers, how accurate are those? We really don't know. If we wait until April, and assuming we don't have any relapse with COVID and have to go back to a different, non-in-person model. The hope is by April or, in the spring, we can do in-person testing and then we can have more credible numbers. So if we have those numbers by the end of April, then we can look at it and say, okay, now how many kids are we dealing with? And that could drive what is the structure of your summer program.
I get it. Some parents want a do-over of this year, and some parents don't know they need a do-over. So I guess, yeah, okay, it's not going to change my mind. So anybody else need more information?
I guess just for the record, I would be perfectly fine, especially given Ellen's specific call out of the additional parachute, for lack of a better term, built into the agreement or the resolution, stipulating that if the reading teacher as well as the principal were not comfortable, that they would still have an additional discussion about that retention. I do want to commend the staff that is to the staff that is currently working. I have had a personal conversation with a parent who is very, very concerned about the third grade reading guarantee and whether or not their student would meet that requirement. She has been thoroughly impressed and pleased with the services that her student has received. So thank you.
As far as I'm concerned, I don't have any problem doing the resolution now because I have a commitment from Dr. Martin and Mrs. Magyar that we're going to have a plan depending on how many children need it. And I also don't have an issue with waiting one more month if that helps anybody make up their mind. So, that's again, that's where I'm at. I don't see any problem with necessarily waiting a month, but I'm perfectly okay with I know that Dr. Martin and Mrs. Magyar will do the right thing by our kids.
Oh, I'm ready to vote on it now.
Thank you. Yeah, I am too.
Okay. Do we need a roll call vote or what do we need?
Roll call. Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yeah.
Mrs. Mack,
No.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Let me hop out of here.
Okay. Next, resolution substitute teachers. Resolved to approve a resolution authorizing employment of certain individuals granted temporary substitute licensure in accordance with House Bill 409. A motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
A discussion?
I just had one question to this point. Are we currently having issues finding substitutes for our district?
Up until today, no. Our fill rates have been pretty consistent as to what they've been in the past, up in the 90s percentile. I sent that email out yesterday and, just reiterated the fact send your child to school if you're awaiting a test result. And I think a lot of our staff read that and said, oh gosh, I'm awaiting a test result. I shouldn't be at work, which kind of addresses the comment that was made in the public comment. So, we've encouraged. And so today we had a 63% fill rate. So we had a lot of people that we could not find.
What's that?
Oh, okay.
Oh.
So maybe it went up to 70, but that's the lowest we've had in a very, very long time. So, it is becoming a little bit more of an issue to find people to come in and cover classes. So, we're seeing an uptick in period subs and teachers, taking coverage for different areas. And so it is becoming more of an issue.
And our service, correct, is providing these, but they won't provide them for us until this is passed.
Correct.
So they have some people perhaps that can fill these positions, but they can't send them to Brecksville Broadview Heights until this is passed.
What is the current state health status of our staff?
And
Go ahead.
we had 9 unfilled absences. We had 27 people on, I believe.
That were all teachers or both classified? Just teachers, okay.
So we had.
I'm sorry, there were 27 teachers out today? Is that correct?
We had more than 27. We had 9 unfilled, we had 25 filled. we have building subs cover, that's what kind of jumped the.
Yeah.
A little bit, and go back and put the building subs in, cover some of the other absences.
That's
And
34.
then luckily, we had some that, we had a couple that were like sites that did not need subs, so we had a few that did not need subs. So we were running around 30, we're about 30 some staff members, not quite 40 today.
Think they'll go, what do we do?
Well, some of them we can have where teachers are out long term and they're out and but yet they can function. We'll get a sub to cover the classroom teachers. We'll get them in the classroom, teach the classroom, one person supervised. We've done that. We talked today about the fact that in the last week or so, we're seeing an uptick in period sub coverage, which is teachers saying, hey, I don't have a third line class. I'll teach third line class for such and such. So we're covering right now doing that, but it's this past week we've seen, a bit of an uptick of absences, so.
Craig, do you know the period sub cost for our teachers versus?
Substantially more.
Thank you.
Period subbing?
Yeah.
Isn't it like 20?
If you have to cover that class for the whole day versus $100 for
day.
the sub, so you're spending $25 an hour. And I don't know if that's really
You're
our
talking
peer,
all day. What's
I was-
periods? Period subbing is just one class, right?
but it's that class has to go throughout the day though. So you have that cost per hour basically.
$25 a period, we can cover 6 to 7 periods, so.
So it's hundreds of dollars.
It gets costly.
And our rate, I think here is much higher than 25, correct?
We can look at it.
I know.
Ran some of the numbers now, I forget what.
I think it's closer to 30.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yeah.
Mrs. Mack,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes. Okay, next item, item E. Ohio minimum wage has been increased to $8.80 per hour. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
This is just complying with state law, right?
Yep, that's correct.
The,
Roll call?
Mr. Dosen,
yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yeah.
Mrs. Mack,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Just, sorry, Fred, just a quick note. Craig, this item is not, it's listed as information.
I just saw that.
So just some cleanup, administrative cleanup. It needs to be an action consent.
Yep. Got it.
Thanks, Mark.
Sorry, Fred. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, item 12, superintendent's other business. High school options catalog A, B, high school baseball spring trip, C, job descriptions, D, approval of superintendent's other business consent agenda. Need a motion?
So moved.
Any second?
Oh, I did.
I think we had a second.
Yeah, Ellen seconded.
Okay, thank you. Discussion?
Any questions about any of these items? No? Okay.
Okay, roll call?
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yeah.
Mrs. Mack,
Yeah.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes. Okay. High school, item F, high school softball spring trip. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just had one question, and forgive me for not bringing it up with the baseball spring trip as well. What is the quarantine policy or travel policy for students and returning back to school?
Post term. Okay, that's interesting. So what we've been doing with these trips is anyone that is going out of state or wants to go on any of these trips, we are sending out a second parent permission to say, look, you're going on this trip at your own risk. Here, you understand, what the kids might be staying in the same hotel room or whatever. We have not implemented a quarantine policy for those kids returning afterwards.
Okay, so at this point in time, if students return from a trip that's out of state, they can immediately return to the classroom?
If that's the model of learning that they're in, yes. Many of our kids, at least in winter, and I suspect it may happen again in the spring, are on remote learning. And so many of those kids aren't coming right back to school as their learning platform is remote. And I know that there will be an option for kids to be able to do that fourth grading period as well.
Sure. Yeah, I'd just be concerned about the safety of the students who are still in the buildings that didn't voluntarily leave.
Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack,
Same.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes. Item 13, superintendent's personnel recommendations. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Uh,
Any other recommendations?
Any questions on the A, B, C, D? All right, roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack,
Need to look through it, please, one more time. and
Sure.
make Sure. Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Okay.
Item 14, treasurer's consent agenda. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Craig, you're on.
Sure. So I'll do the financial update relatively quick. Here's our outlook, which people can kind of dive into this as for the month of December, we had, again, these are December finances. It seems like weird because we're basically going to be closing the month of January soon. We had a favorable outlook on revenues, which again, remember a lot of that was in December. We had that large influx of workman's comp, and then we transfer some of that out for the PI
I'm sorry,
project.
Craig, is this just December? I think this is.
This
all
is through.
July through. It's
July through,
December,
right,
so
but
that's
that's-
not just for the month. It's
Correct.
cumulative through December.
Yes. But that's why we're kind of seeing a little bit of
It
a jump.
gets cut off on the title up above if you see where it says
I did notice
analysis
that.
through. So it
Sometimes they
leaves you
have-
hanging a little bit.
Sometimes they have like little programming glitches, which is kind of strange, but in a favorable way, about $200,000, which is a net favorable impact. And again, the cash, it's just, some of this is always, just cash flow and how things are moving in and out. So we have a favorable impact on the forecast right now of $431,000. This would have our cash balance then at the end of the year be a deficit total overall of $112,000. So we're kind of inching better, but we're still deficit spending according to this by the end of the fiscal year. Here are the revenue collections for the month of December compared to the prior year. So we can see that large increase in other revenue, which is again due to that workman's comp increase. Here's our overall from last year to this year. It is $1.4 million lower. And again, a lot of that is that combination of pay to participate. We've had some decreases there. We've had the all-day kindergarten, which is a large portion of this, the state funding. And again, this is comparing at this point last year, which if you remember on the state funding side, they have not cut the money until the spring. So that's why the state funding here shows that it's down. Then here's how it compares to the forecast to show you how it gets to the positive 230,000 favorable. So we're looking at a little bit extra in tax revenue, which those monies will be coming in here shortly, and get a better idea what our final settlement numbers are going to be. And then I think this will be our first opportunity to see if we have any, I guess, discrepancies in some of the real estate, because we didn't see that in the fall. So I think a lot of people are kind of watching this spring and again in the fall for next year to see if we see any more impacts of COVID impacts on the real estate revenues. Okay, so that's the total of where we'd be for the year. And then we dive into some expenditures. We see that our expenditures are over what they were last year. And that's again because of salaries increases and whatnot. Those are the different categories that we have. So we've done pretty well. Again, our purchase services are down by $400,000. This has been a concerted effort from many people So a lot of this, we've seen a lot of decreases in tuition and whatnot that have really accounted for some of this. And to this point, actually substitutes have been down. So we're going to kind of watch this now that we're back in session 5 days, because that's where they come out of as a purchase service. So we'll kind of see if that starts to inch up. The period subbing would not come out of this section though, just to be clear. But if we're getting the Wren Hill subs, then that's where that will come out of. Okay, so that's only higher by 109,000 for the comparison. And then that's our favorable as it compares to the forecast, edging us up a little bit closer to the break point. So that's where we would end. So we're going to kind of monitor this. And again, I shared with you some of the good funding news earlier. So we're going to hopefully, and would be our goal to be at least a break-even point, and we'll just kind of keep monitoring this as we go.
Anything in particular that, I know you said less substitutes, but with respect to less tuition, anything in particular that?
It's our special education tuition is a large portion of that.
Is there anything in particular that?
We brought some of our students back into the district. So some of those settlement agreements were extremely expensive. So bringing them back here, we're now not having to push that money out as an expenditure. It's coming back to us basically.
Okay.
Yep.
How many students came back into the district?
We had 3 that were placed out that cost anywhere between $35,000 and $80,000
Per kid.
per student.
So we were just having this discussion is we're going to be coming up this spring to file for catastrophic reimbursement. So one of the things so we have a very large catastrophic number. Okay. So last year we reported over $2 million that we spend to educate some of our most medically fragile students or whatever in special education. So we can file for the state to get some of that money back. We get about $200,000 back. It's not a really good return on your money, but it's a reimbursement, right? So while that number may be decreasing, we may start to see a decrease this year or next year as we bring kids back into the district. We have to realize we actually start spending $1 million and only getting 100,000 back, but that's really for us a good thing because that reimbursement rate is so low. So Cindy and Sarah are working on those numbers now along with payroll to kind of get a good handle of where it's at this year. And then it'll continue to ripple through as more kids come back to the district. Because we have some students that cost, I think our highest last year was 150,000 for one student.
Just to be clear, because I can't see her behind the podium. So
Your
we're
microphone's up.
creating, we bring those kids back and we create a program here on site for those students, right?
Yes.
They're often sent away. I'm just like explaining, correct me. We send them away if we can't provide that service in some cases. But what we're doing is, and what Craig is saying is it's more financially, it's beneficial for us to bring them back in some cases.
Yes, like this year we created an autism unit at the elementary, which allowed us for 2 students who were placed on that in the district. And because we didn't have to hire a teacher, it's already in district, it essentially cost us nothing to open the unit except for some supplies that we needed. And we've been very generous with it. And using that motion to help get a lot of the materials that we needed for that. $4,000, which is nothing in comparison to what we would spend to send those 2 students out that we brought back. The goal for next year is to open another autism unit at middle school level because 2 of our students that are currently at the elementary level will be moving up to the middle school. And we have a couple of students in our class that work alone at the middle school that we can move and, to meet their needs specifically. And then there's also, there's constant talk about, when the new building opens, because it'll open some space at the middle school with 5th grade being gone, the opportunity to open some kind of computer unit, at the middle school and high school level so that, the opportunity, and I think next year we really will only have about 6 students placed out in our entire district. So if we can get some of the 6 that are out back into the district,
We're going to be able to, in the SCUSA donation, they had that sensory room, which was created. It's in one of our buildings.
and we have sensory rooms in every building.
So we're planning on that exact same thing. We have space allocated. Is that true or
Well,
do you know?
Well, I don't know where the actual unit would be yet until.
We have sensory rooms designed in every pod in the new elementary
Wonderful.
school.
Yeah, okay, because the thing is those students now are around their typical peers, and it's just, I'm very thankful that you've come to our district. And I know our parents are very thankful, and I'm hopeful to see those numbers go down the more, if it's appropriate, that we keep these students, because once they were leaving us, they're never coming back generally.
And that's typically what happens. So if you have a student in first or second grade who leaves, that, you know, if it's $100,000 a year, you times that by 10 years,
Right.
and you're talking $1 million.
Okay. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
and to Cindy's credit too, we've also seen a huge decrease. And I think part of this is that she's really been starting to build some relationships with the parents, and we've seen a decrease in our legal fees too. So we're being, I don't know if it's just cooperative or what. She's like the whisperer, maybe, I guess, because I'm like, I got the last bill. I'm like, $200. This is great. So we're saving money there too. I mean, it all impacts that bottom line. So we're definitely saving a lot of money in legal fees with our special education department. So she's been very busy on that special ed audit that we had last year.
And in the communications key, as you see, you came into a place where wasn't our best shining moment, and our parents want to be heard, and so that was important for the board members who sat there, that we hope to have those parents' communications and their concerns heard. So I'm glad to hear that we're moving in the right direction and that we're going to continue doing that. So thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
So I'm going to go out of order here just because I will let Chris have a minute to talk. But this item C is a depository agreement. I kind of sent a board update with this. We've kind of dug into some of our fees that we've been getting from Citizens Bank. And so we're going to be making a shift over to Dollar Bank. They are extremely eager for our business, and they've been very interested in gaining that relationship with us. So we will experience no fees whatsoever for at least 2 years is a part of their first part of that agreement, and the fees are substantially lower. So the first 2 years we'll probably save somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000 in banking fees. And then after that, it may go down, but we'll still be cheaper than Citizens Bank. So that's why we're going to be looking at making a shift there. The donation.
Do we get a toaster with that too?
I don't know, maybe. I can probably work that up. The donations are as listed. We added one today. If you did not see that, they're here, the minutes for approval. And then I will go back to this big hefty item, which is the design build services for HVAC improvements. We have been all working hard on this. Joelle's been a part of some of the meetings. Chris and I have worked with extensively. We've talked with David Riley. So I will kind of let him give a quick overview of what this is. This is our first step in kind of moving in that process before we have our final contract, but we've gone through that scope of work to get us to a guaranteed maximum price, basically, that does have some contingency money in it. So I don't know if you want to kind of share what this will accomplish for the district in terms of how this will benefit our students and getting that building up to par, especially at the middle school. The middle school has the bulk of this work.
As far as HVAC work goes and equipment, middle school is the bulk of the work being performed.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chris. Can everybody hear him if he's not?
No.
Yeah, thanks.
Let's hope the mic doesn't cut out.
Right.
So yes, the middle school HVAC systems are the bulk of the project. There are actually 3 specific systems that will be addressed with this that are air conditioning, service approximately 30 classrooms in the guidance area. We are also doing a boiler plant at the middle school, and all new equipment will get updated control systems, energy management. We will also overlay the existing equipment with energy management. And we will also put new controls on primary equipment at the high school and overlay the remainder of those controls with energy management. Much of the contingency money that's identified is specifically identified for specific room level ventilation. They're called VAV boxes. One of the driving factors for Gardner was they have an AI component where they can plug into the system and do a diagnostic so that district maintenance personnel can go out and perform a repair before we tap into contingency money.
Right. And it actually, that AI is pretty impressive. It monitors, it'll be monitoring room temperatures throughout the district every 15 minutes and kind of giving instant feedback. So hopefully we can start almost respond, our maintenance can almost respond much quicker. It's going to be less laborious for them. So
It was, they did a demonstration and control points were set up and they were the same for heating and cooling, which means that VAV, that ventilator for that space could not function correctly. You have to have a heating set point, which is usually lower than the cooling set point, so 2 or 3 degrees. And then that system will fluctuate between those temperature set points. Well, when they're the same, it's telling the system to heat and cool at the same time. So
The difficulty we've had at the high school with, as far as temperature, at least what I've heard and what I've noticed, this is not gonna happen, to the best of your knowledge.
we will make huge.
Not the same company, not the same, okay.
no.
Well, yeah, and per the presentation, the AI, I believe stands for Applied Intelligence, and really what they're doing when they install this new system is there's variety of data points, monitoring elements, collecting a lot of data, and the Applied Intelligence is some type of algorithms and software that they've developed to try to analyze that data real time and flag issues and let us know when there's issues. So over time, and correct me, Chris, if I'm wrong, I think the idea is once we get the system in and we get it kind of running and tuned and working to get more experience with it. And because a lot of the alerts and things you can set up yourself, but on the front end, the Applied Intelligence appears to have a lot to offer while you're still, all of our staff is getting to know the system and learning how better to run it and monitor it and figure out what needs to change and when.
Yes, sir, that is correct. And again, just as a note, and I know the PI committee is familiar with this, but the roof project that we're trying to perform this summer, it corresponds directly with the new HVAC equipment that will go on those roofs to be replaced, which should save the district a pretty good chunk of money with that piece of coordination.
Yeah.
Very high level overview. So.
Thank you, Chris.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add a word of thanks to Craig and Chris and other staff members that have been involved with this. You know, as many of you know, we've had a long list of PI or permanent improvement needs. And Craig took a fresh look as he's new to our district on our PI funding and tried to figure out, you know, how can we address some of these large needs like roofing, HVAC, controls in a more comprehensive manner. And so I know there was a lot of work put in to bring this forward. And not only that, but this particular effort to combine roofing and HVAC in a way that we kind of created a little market project to allow multiple organizations to bid on it. So we kind of created a big project that allowed certain companies to analyze and bid it and allow us to move forward with something where we can address a number of big items all at once. And the HVAC and roofing kind of tie together because you've got units on the roof. So if you can do them in conjunction, which is what this is doing, you have cost savings. So kudos to Craig.
Thank you, Craig and Chris.
You know,
You're welcome.
and I'm sorry. This is important. There are also approximately 20 classrooms that don't have air conditioning currently. So there's a large area of space at the middle school that's unair conditioned today that when the project's done will be air conditioned.
Oh, good. Thank you.
And if that is going to address all of the unair conditioned pockets in the middle school, except for the gym, is that?
Basically the gym, yeah. So that
Okay.
building will be about 90% or more air conditioned, which they're hoping that even though the rest of it is air conditioned, it's going to still make the gym somewhat more comfortable.
Right, right. And the importance there is, as we look to the future in fall of 2022, when the new building opens, which will be air conditioned, we will then have all of our classrooms air conditioned, which every year when we look at when do we start school, part of the reason to push the start date later is because so many of our buildings don't have air conditioning and you're trying to escape the heat. This will, be a big benefit because we'll be able to take that off as a consideration and look when it makes most sense to start the school year.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mark.
Roll call.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
We're in the wrong order. That wasn't me. Sorry. Oops, let me move down here. Sorry.
Okay. Closing items. Announcements. The next regular meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for February 24th, 2021 at 7 p.m. at the Education Center, 6638 Mill Road, Brecksville, Ohio, 44141. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yeah.
Mrs. Mack, Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
8:34.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, folks.
Get well soon, Fred.
I'm going to do my every best to do that. Thank you.
I can take your leave, man.